Chapter 241. She had only fought with this magical beast for a short while, but she had already met with danger several times. If it wasn't for her nimble movements and the fact that she had these big rocks as cover, she would have already become food in this magical beast's stomach. Although this magical beast's body was huge, its movements were more nimble and faster than a civet cat. Adding on the fact that it had wings, its body could turn in a circle as it wished. Therefore, Ning Xuema had a hard time dodging its claws. There were a few times when she flew past its claws, and her clothes were almost caught by its claws. One person and one beast were like a whirlwind circling around the rocks. From time to time, a big rock would be smashed into the air by this magical beast and then fall to the ground. The momentum was astonishing, and the scene was frightening. Little Apple, Little Apple. Ning Xuema was dodging with all her might, and at the same time, she was calling out to that unruly Kirin. When she first woke up and saw this magical beast, she thought that Kirin had been eaten by this magical beast, but after sensing it, she knew that she was wrong. She had established a blood contract with Kirin, so she could sense whether it was alive or not. She could even sense its mood at this moment, and it seemed to be very happy. This little bastard. She didn't need to guess to know that it should have gone to have fun. Roar. Suddenly, a clear and long whistle came from afar. The whistle was long and clear, as if it came from the sky. That magical beast that was crazily attacking Ning Xuema heard this whistle, and its body suddenly trembled. It stopped in its tracks and looked in the direction where the whistle came from. Suddenly, its tail clamped, and it no longer cared about attacking Ning Xuema. It turned around and ran away. Roar! Another long whistle came. This time, the whistle took a few turns, and there was a faint sense of threat. That magical beast's feet stopped, and its body trembled like a sieve. It was obvious that it was extremely scared, but it didn't dare to run away. Ning Xuema's heart moved, and she also looked in the direction where the whistle came from. From the depths of the forest, a blue figure was like lightning, and it was flying towards this direction. Almost in the blink of an eye, it had already rushed to this pile of rocks. Little Apple, this guy is finally back. The moment Kirin saw Ning Xuema, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. His eyes quickly turned to the magical beast, and he walked over step by step. The magical beast's body trembled in fear. It seemed to want to retreat, but its legs were weak and it couldn't retreat at all. Kirin's body was obviously much smaller than it, but it was like a mouse that had seen a cat. All it could do was tremble. Kirin didn't hesitate. He raised his head and roared. His body flew up like he was stepping on clouds. He landed on the magical beast and slammed his claw on the beast's head. The magical beast's head didn't seem to be damaged, but it fell down with a loud bang. Its four hooves kicked the ground, and then it stopped moving. Kirin's mouth was on its forehead, as if she was sucking something. She looked very pleased. Is it delicious? Ning Xuema sat down opposite it. Delicious. It's delicious. Kirin shook his head and replied subconsciously. Did you have fun? Very fun. I ran to 2 small mountains and caught 3 magical beasts. This kind of beast spirit is still the best. It's much better than those rotten leaves. Kirin was in high spirits. It seems that you are indeed the king of all beasts. You are quite capable, and you can protect yourself in this world. There's no need for you to follow me anymore. After we go down the mountain, let's part ways. Ning Xuema stood up. Kirin finally reacted. It quickly grabbed the corner of her clothes with its claw. Master, are you angry? Chapter 242. Ning Xuema glanced at it coldly, pulled the corner of her clothes, and turned to leave. She didn't want it anymore? Kirin panicked. It moved in front of her and said, Master, don't be angry. Little Apple knows it's wrong. Please don't abandon me. It had finally found someone who treated it well. Ning Xuema continued to ignore it, bypassing it and continuing to advance. Master, please forgive me. I really know it's my fault. I shouldn't have left you here alone. I won't do it again. Kirin was smart enough to know where it was wrong. Ning Xuema stopped and looked at it seriously. Little Apple, there are not many true friends in this world, and every one of them is worth cherishing. When I established the contract with you, I treated you as a friend. A friend's safety is your own safety. When a friend's life is in your hands, you should protect him at all costs. If I didn't react fast enough, I would have died here, and you would have been implicated. Kieran lowered its head. I was wrong. This little guy was still a child. Because it lacked education, it didn't know what was right and what was wrong. Although Ning Xuema was the boss of the Secret Service, her subordinates had already become her subordinates. There were some things that she only needed to instruct them and didn't need to say anything else. She wasn't good at educating people, especially a child. Looking at Kieran, who was drooping its head, she felt a headache. She suppressed the anger in her heart and took the opportunity to educate it. You have to keep your promise. Since you made a promise, you have to keep your promise. As the saying goes, a promise is worth 1,000 gold. Kieran stood in front of her obediently and listened to her lecture. From time to time, it rubbed its big head against the corner of her clothes. Even though Ning Xuema's anger was overflowing to the heavens, it was completely wiped away by him. She finally stopped talking and glanced at him. The little guy was really obedient now. It blinked its big eyes and looked at her. When she stopped talking, it seemed to want more. Master, what else? Ning Xuema was speechless. Little Apple, don't you hate me for scolding you like this? Kieran shook his head. No, I don't. I know you're only saying that for my own good. After all these years, I can't find anyone to say that to me. They all hate me. When he said the last sentence, his tone became gloomy. Ning Xuema wasn't a soft-hearted person. At this moment, looking at the little Qilin, her mood couldn't help but soften. She raised her hand and patted its head. Don't be sad. You have me in the future. The little Qilin fiercely nodded its big head and looked at her eagerly. Then, have you forgiven me? Don't make the same mistake again. Yes, I won't do it again, Kieran promised. Ning Xuema couldn't help but rub its head again. You really look like my mother. Kieran rubbed her hand. Ning Xuema. She was stunned. Including her age in her previous life, she was only 22 years old. Where did such a big Qilin come from? This little guy's nonsense was really shocking. Didn't you say that you've never seen your mother? Ning Xuema asked tentatively. Yes, I've never seen her. No, I've seen her before, but I was too young to remember. I don't remember what she looked like. There was some regret in the little Qilin's voice. Its pair of beautiful big eyes looked at Ning Xuema again. However, in my imagination, my mother should be as beautiful and magnanimous as you. You would scold me if I did something wrong and praise me if I did something right. Chapter 243. Ning Xuema couldn't help but sigh when she saw the yearning look on its face. How much does this Kieran lack of fatherly and motherly love? Some education was enough, so Ning Xuema didn't say anything more. Her stomach rumbled a few times. Kieran heard it and immediately said, Master, are you hungry? Why don't we roast the demon tiger meat? Let's roast it and eat it to vent your anger. It turned around to look for the demon beast that had fallen to the ground. It turned around a big rock and suddenly exclaimed, this? What's going on? Its voice was filled with shock. Ning Xuema's figure flashed and returned to the place where the demon beast was lying. She was stunned. In just a short while, the majestic and mighty demon tiger's flesh and blood had disappeared without a trace. There was only a skeleton left. Little Apple, are you sure you only sucked its beast spirit and not its flesh and blood? No, I only consume beast spirits. Its flesh and blood should be intact. Kieran started to walk around the skeleton, trying to find out the reason. Ning Xuema's expression changed slightly. Although she didn't know what was going on, she sensed a huge danger. Don't bother about it. Let's go quickly. She pulled Kieran's horn and signaled it to go quickly. Kieran was still unconvinced and wanted to find out the reason. What kind of thing is taking advantage of me? Go quickly. Ning Xuema's voice became stern. She jumped onto a big rock and was about to fly forward. There was a loud rumbling sound under her feet, as if there was a sudden earthquake. Countless big rocks shook violently. In the blink of an eye, a huge black hole appeared on the ground. The little Qilin was standing there, and it was caught off guard. With a shriek, it fell straight into the hole. Little Apple, The big rock under Ning Shuema's feet also rolled forward a few times. Luckily, she was quick and flew away in time. Everything happened in an instant. Ning Shuema didn't have enough time to grab the little Qilin. She could only watch helplessly as it fell into the pitch-black hole that she couldn't see the bottom of. The earthquake hadn't stopped yet. Countless boulders were rolling towards the hole. "Master! Master!" Kirin's cries came faintly from the big hole. She was like a frightened child, helpless and miserable. "Don't abandon me." Ning Shuema's mind exploded as number 2's face flashed across her mind. She would never watch her companion die in front of her again, even if it was just a Kirin. Almost without thinking, she jumped into the big hole as well. That hole was not as deep as she had imagined. Ning Shuema relied on the heavenly silkworm's entanglement to descend for about 20 to 30 meters before she finally stepped on solid ground. Above her, rocks continued to tumble down. The momentum was astonishing. Under such circumstances, she couldn't jump forward. Ning Shuema could only dodge the boulders while calling out Kirin's name. "Master!" Kirin flew over and knocked away a boulder that was flying towards Ning Shuema. It used its beak to drag her to a corner. "Are you okay?" Ning Shuema looked at it. Due to the increase in her inner strength, her eyesight had improved a lot. Although the big hole was dark, she could still see Kirin's appearance. "Master, I thought you had abandoned me." The little Qilin sobbed. "I thought I would be locked up in the darkness for countless years." It was clearly scared out of its wits as it leaned against Ning Shuema and slightly trembled. Chapter 244. I won't leave you behind." Ning Shuema sighed and promised, "Oh right, don't you know how to fly? Why didn't you jump up again? This place is strange. I can't use my telekinesis." Kirin's voice was a little panicked. Ning Shuema's heart skipped a beat. She secretly circulated the little telekinesis in her body and found that it was empty again. She couldn't sense even a trace of telekinesis. She circulated her inner energy again. Fortunately, her inner energy could still circulate as she wished. There was a horizontal passage on the side of the cave. Ning Shuema and Kirin were hiding in this passage. The entrance to the cave had been completely sealed by the large rock that had rolled in. It was impossible to go back the way they came, so they could only look for another exit. "Let's go. We'll find another exit." Ning Shuema sighed and walked forward. Ever since she came to Tianshu Mountain, it was as if she was fated to encounter all kinds of caves. After escaping one, she would encounter a second one. In the previous cave, she was accompanied by Jiuzun, who was small but had great abilities. Although she was nervous, she wasn't afraid. Now, she only had this crying Kirin by her side. Her future was uncertain. This cave wouldn't have appeared for no reason. It might have something to do with the unknown creature that sucked the demon tiger dry. "Little apple in here, you must listen to my commands. If I don't let you touch something, you absolutely cannot touch it." Ning Shuema instructed the little Qilin beside her.
Yes.
Kirin also knew that it had implicated its master again. It felt very guilty and didn't dare to raise its head. If you don't want to implicate your friends, think of a way to make yourself stronger. Become a real divine beast. Ning Shuema's voice was faint. Kirin's expression was too transparent. All its thoughts were written on its face. Ning Shuema naturally saw it clearly. Kirin raised its head and clenched its little paws on the ground. "I want to become stronger," it told itself in its heart. It wanted to become a divine beast that could protect its master at all times, and not let its master protect it all the time. It took a few steps forward and rushed ahead. "Master, I'll scout the way. My nose is very sensitive." Its nose was the most sensitive. If there was any danger ahead, it would be able to sense it in advance. "Okay, I'll leave the scouting to you." Ning Shuema agreed readily. She had to train Kirin's sense of responsibility. Kirin seemed to have grown up a lot. He was still afraid, but fear could not solve any problems. He had to overcome his fear. This passageway was crooked and crooked, going up and down at times. It was not easy to walk. Fortunately, there were no other dangers. The man and the beast didn't encounter any attacks along the way. It was too peaceful for them to reach the end of the road. There was a tall jade door at the end. The jade was white marble with intricate patterns engraved on it, emitting a faint white light. Could this be the tomb of some noble? Ning Xuema looked at the door and pondered. She felt that the door looked like the door of a tomb. She recalled the terrain of the 8th summit. As she had just arrived at the 8th summit not long ago, she did not have the time to observe anything. She only vaguely felt that this place was a trap. It shouldn't be a good cave. Moreover, the 8th summit was so dangerous. It was not easy to build a tomb here. The craftsman who built the tomb had to have a high level of telekinesis to reach the 8th summit. Therefore, the possibility of this place being a tomb was not high. Then, what was this door for? Master, should we break open this stone door? Chapter 245. Ning Xuema nodded. Of course we have to open it, but we can't knock into it. I'm afraid there's a trap. Wait a minute. Let me take a look. They had no other way out, so they had to open the jade door first. There was indeed a trap on the jade door. Fortunately, Ning Xuema was an expert when it came to traps. She touched and knocked on the jade door and pressed it with her finger from time to time. After a while, there was a rumbling sound, and the jade door automatically opened to both sides. Candlelight instantly flowed out. The moment the jade door opened, Ning Xuema pulled Kiran to hide in a corner. They stood in a place that was easy to defend and hard to attack. They were guarding against any sneak attacks from inside. The moment she saw the candlelight, she was slightly stunned. How could there be candlelight in this place? She held her breath and waited for a moment. The candlelight was warm, and nothing scary jumped out. Only then did she try to enter the jade door with the little Qilin. However, after she saw everything inside, she was stunned. Inside the jade door was a hall. There were candlesticks on both sides of the hall. There was black grease in the candlesticks, and a wick was lying in the grease. Only a small part of the wick was burning with a faint yellow flame. Ning Xuema looked at the grease and knew that it was the legendary Sharkman's lamp that would not be extinguished for thousands of years. The decoration of the hall was very simple. There was no table or chair. There was only a cloud bed in the middle of the hall, and on the cloud bed was a translucent coffin. Ning Xuema couldn't help but sigh when she saw the coffin. It turned out that this was a tomb. However, the structure of this tomb was too simple. Even the tombs of landowning households were more complicated than this. Her gaze fell on the coffin, and her heart skipped a beat. A crystal coffin. She actually saw a priceless crystal coffin in such a simple tomb. The crystal coffin was also engraved with complicated patterns. The patterns were a little strange, like groups of yin and yang fishes intertwined together. Ning Xuema had never seen such patterns before. He could only faintly feel that this pattern had an ancient and mysterious aura. A chain as thick as a finger extended from each of the 4 corners of the coffin and the center of the coffin lid. The chains also seemed to be carved out of crystal. They were sparkling and translucent, and there were also patterns on them. The patterns were like small gourds, and they extended all the way to the top of the hall. At first glance, the chain seemed to be locking the lid of the coffin. But what could such a thin chain lock? Ning Xuema believed that even with her strength, she would be able to break the chain with just 2 fingers. So this is actually a decoration, right? Decorating the crystal coffin. Her gaze fell on the crystal coffin again. Through the translucent crystal coffin, one could see a person lying inside. It was a person with black hair and red clothes. The light in the hall came from 8 different directions and shone on the crystal coffin, making it look even more bizarre. It made it impossible to see the true face of the person inside the coffin. Kiran had become a lot more cautious after getting into trouble. It slowly moved closer and looked at the person inside the coffin. It exclaimed in surprise, "Is this person sealed inside alive?" The person inside the coffin raised both of his arms and placed his hands on the lid of the crystal coffin, as if he was trying to open the lid and sit up. However, it was obviously futile. This action was forever frozen in place, and no one knew how many years it had been frozen. When Ning Xuema first entered the passage outside, she could still feel an inexplicable murderous aura. However, after entering the hall, the murderous aura obviously disappeared. Chapter 246. This was clearly a cold underground tomb, but she actually felt a trace of inexplicable warmth in this hall. She slowly walked forward and carefully looked at the person in the coffin. Her heart skipped a beat. This time, she finally saw the face of the person in the coffin. It was a man. Moreover, it was an extremely handsome man. His skin was like jade, his eyebrows were like a painting, slanted to his temples, his eyes were closed, his eyelashes were curled, his nose was high, and his light red lips were slightly pursed. His lying posture was very peaceful, not like he was dead, but like he was sleeping soundly. It seemed that as long as he gently patted the coffin lid, he would be able to sit up and talk to someone. And beside him, there was a water-blue guqin. The body of the guqin seemed to be made of jade. Under the reflection of the candlelight outside the coffin, it flashed with a wave-like luster. It also reflected the person in the coffin as if he was lying in water, his body rippling. Kieran's eyes lit up. Blackwave guqin. This is the Blackwave guqin. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. She had heard of this Blackwave guqin before. It was like the 8 great divine weapons in the myths and legends of her time. This Blackwave guqin was one of the 10 great divine weapons in the ancient legends of this era. Its effect was a bit like the Fushi guqin. It was said that it could be used to cultivate one's mind, but it could also be used as a weapon to kill people. When it was played normally, the sound was like the sound of nature, and birds and beasts could dance to the sound of the guqin. And once special skills were used, every note played would be a hidden weapon that could kill people. It could raise a mountain to the ground while talking and laughing. It was also said that if the person playing the guqin reached the peak, they could attract the water of the underworld, drown everything in the world, and turn the entire earth into a vast ocean. It was said that this Blackwave guqin was once a treasure of the immortal world. Later, it fell into the hands of the demon ancestor and became the tool that the demon ancestor used to destroy the world. Like many myths and legends, evil could not prevail over good. The demon ancestor who wanted to destroy the world was eliminated by the immortals, and the Blackwave guqin was also annihilated without a trace. Of course, these were all fragments of legends recorded in ancient books. Any legend would be greatly discounted, and most of them were exaggerated. So Ning Xuema always had the attitude of looking at these legends and did not believe them at all. He thought it was just a story written by some ancestor to fool the later generations. Just like those mythical characters in China's ancient legends, who would believe that these people really existed. He just didn't expect that the zither in the myths and legends would actually appear here. She looked at the guqin from top to bottom. This thing can attract the water of the netherworld when played? Bullshit. Perhaps there was some psychokinesis in the zither, and it could be used as a weapon to kill people. Thus, some people started to make it sound like a legend, however. Since this zither was said to be so awesome, it must be a good treasure. She also happened to like playing the zither. If she could get this thing out and bring it back, it would be a worthwhile trip. He had narrowly escaped death in the Heavenly Book Mountain for so long, but he had yet to obtain anything good. What a waste. Kieran was also very happy. It was regretting that it had caused its master to fall into this place. Now that it saw this treasure, it immediately became excited and urged, "Master, you have to find a way to get this zither back. It will definitely become a magic weapon that you carry around with you. Your skills will also be greatly improved. You can't return empty-handed from a treasure mountain." "All right, I got it," Ning Xuema interrupted. Chapter 247. She was still cautious. She first circled around the crystal coffin to see if there were any inscriptions or something like that. She wanted to know who was inside the coffin. But after circling around twice, she didn't find anything. She stood in front of the crystal coffin for a while and closed her eyes. All the cells in her body were activated to detect the aura around her. The aura around her was very warm and pure. She couldn't sense any danger. Kieran also said, "There's no danger here. There's no evil aura at all. We Kierans are the most sensitive to evil aura. We can sense it even if it's just a little bit." Ning Xuema tapped the coffin lid with her finger, making a crisp sound. "Little apple, do you think the person inside is a dumpling?" "Dumpling?" Kieran didn't understand. "It's a zombie. Red-eyed, green-eyed. The kind that can strangle all living things to death." Ning Shuama told him the zombie movies and TV shows she had seen before. No, zombies have corpse aura. I can smell it. Kieran's answer was resolute and decisive. Obviously, it knew about zombies. Ning Shuima was finally relieved. She had just circled around the coffin. There weren't any legendary treasures around the coffin that could deal with zombies. For example, ink bucket golden thread, glutinous rice, cross, etc. This meant that the person inside the crystal coffin wasn't sealed as a zombie. The reason why it didn't rot was probably because the crystal coffin was sealed well and the anti-corrosion measures were in place. She could tell just by looking at the zither inside. The zither was so bright, and even the paint on it was flawless. It could be seen that the anti-corrosion technology was high-end. She was an expert in opening mechanisms, but she circled around the crystal coffin 7 or 8 times and still couldn't find a crack to open it. The coffin lid and the coffin body seemed to be one. They were completely fused together. There wasn't a single crack to be found. Kieran was impatient. Master, why don't I bite it open? Although it couldn't use its telekinesis in here, Kieran's body was very strong, especially its teeth, which were as hard as diamonds. Not to mention crystal, it could even bite a hole in steel. Perhaps because it was a mythical beast, it had been locked underground for more than 1,000 years. Its teeth were still as white as jade, and it didn't have the usual yellowish teeth of a wild beast. Ning Shuima patted its teeth and signaled it to shut up. This was a cultural relic. Although she couldn't take the crystal coffin away even if it was well preserved, she couldn't bear to destroy such an exquisite cultural relic. Therefore, she rejected Kieran's simple and crude method. Instead, she wandered around and adjusted the angle of the surrounding candles from time to time, allowing their light to reflect on the surface. But no matter which angle it was, the light refracted by the crystal coffin was the same, and there was no flaw in it. Kieran squatted beside her and watched her work. It was a little bored and looked at the thin chains on the crystal coffin. It was not allowed to gnaw on the crystal coffin, but it should be fine for it to gnaw on the thin chains, right? It wanted to grind its teeth. It shook its head and wagged its tail as it walked forward. First, it used its claws to pull at the thin chains. The thin chains collided with each other and made a tinkling sound, like a string of wind chimes ringing in the wind. The sound was so nice. Kieran pulled at the chains one by one, and each chain made a different sound. Some were like the gurgling of a stream, some were like the blowing of the wind, and some were like pearls falling on a jade plate. It was addicted to pulling at the chains. Ning Shuima listened for a moment and suddenly had an idea. She looked at the chains. Chapter 248. There were a total of 5 chains, and the zither strings in the crystal coffin also had 5 strings. The sound of each chain was like a musical note. Could it be that these chains could also play some kind of music? She let the little Qilin stand to one side first while she tried to fiddle with these crystal chains. She originally knew how to play the guqin, and at this moment, the sound of these fine chains was so heavenly. Unconsciously, she used these fine chains to play an ancient tune called Homecoming Song. The music sounded in the hall. She felt something in her heart, and when she played, she couldn't help but think of her hometown, the friends, and the family she would never see again. This song was originally somewhat sorrowful, and when she played it in such a state of mind, it became even more sorrowful. Each note seemed to be alive as it wandered around the hall, circling around. The surrounding candlelight swayed with the notes, as if they were dancing to the music. When the song ended, Ning Shuima heard a sobbing sound. She looked up and saw that Kieran's big eyes were tearing up, and it was crying like a tearful Qilin. The corner of her mouth twitched. Kieran was too emotional. She raised her hand and rubbed its head. "Why are you crying?" Little Qilin said. "I miss my father and mother." Ning Shuima was speechless. "You haven't seen them? You still miss them?" "I miss them because I haven't seen them. They must be the people who loved Little Apple the most in the world. It's a pity that they died early." "Master, where are your parents?" Ning Shuima sighed. She was an abandoned child in her previous life. It was said that she was abandoned by the roadside when she was born and was picked up by her adoptive parents. Her adoptive parents were very good to her, and they loved her as if she was their biological daughter. She was also very hardworking, and her IQ was ridiculously high. When she was in school, she skipped grades and went to university at the age of 12. She was chosen by the National Bureau of Intelligence, and they wanted to recruit her to become an agent. But at that time, she was not interested in being an agent. The National Bureau of Intelligence tried to recruit her several times, but she rejected them all. If it wasn't for that accident, she might not have been able to become an agent in this life. And that accident also caused her to lose her only family in the world. While she was studying abroad, her parents were assassinated at home. Her world collapsed in an instant. Later, she found out that her parents were also secret agents who had been assassinated by assassins sent by M country. In order to avenge her parents, she finally agreed to join the National Bureau and began to undergo a series of special agent training. After 5 years of hard work, she finally grew up and gradually became the leader of her group. Of course, she also finally found the killer who killed her parents and avenged her parents. Once you stepped into the Secret Service industry, it was a lifelong commitment. It was impossible to quit halfway. She also had friends, comrades, and subordinates in the Secret Service team. Her relationship with them was like family. It was a pity that he couldn't see them anymore. Speaking of which, it was strange. In those transmigration novels, most of the protagonists had transmigrated by accident, but she had transmigrated in her sleep. When she woke up, she had arrived in another world and could not return. In her previous life, her parents had passed away when she was 12 years old. In this life, her parents had passed away when she was 8 years old. Whether it was in her previous life or in this life, she was a tragic child. She was destined not to grow up under the care of her parents. Her life experience was somewhat similar to Kieran's, but she was much luckier than Kieran. At least she had tasted the love of a father and a mother. Chapter 249. She had a similar background as Kieran, but she was much luckier than Kieran. At least, she had experienced the love of her parents and remembered how they looked like. Kieran, on the other hand, was much more pitiful. It didn't even know how its parents looked like. She patted Kieran's horn again. My parents passed away a long time ago. We're both in the same boat. Kieran immediately rubbed its horn against her body. Then we'll depend on each other in the future. It suddenly had an epiphany and looked at her with its big eyes. Master, why don't you be my mother? Ning Shuima was speechless. She was shocked. Little Apple, I'm only 13 years old this year. How about you? You're more than 2,000 years old. Although you look young, you can't just call me your mother. I feel scared when you call me sister. Kieran lowered its head. I know, but I always feel that you look like my mother. I want to be close to you. Ning Shuima waved her hand. Little Apple, you're wrong. I'm a pure human. I don't have any Kieran blood. I won't look like your mother no matter what. Even in my previous life, my soul doesn't belong to this era. Even if there was a previous life, it would be in our era. I won't be reincarnated as a Kieran in this world. My mother isn't a Kieran. My father is. Kieran argued. Then what is your mother? Kieran is a hybrid? I don't know. Kieran shook its head sadly. I don't know. My people are very secretive about my mother. They only say that she's an evil woman, but I believe that my mother is a good person. She's definitely not a bad person. In the eyes of a child, parents were naturally the best people. They couldn't tolerate others saying anything bad about them. So Kieran was the same. It would fight with anyone who said anything bad about its mother. It didn't have any playmates in the entire Kieran tribe. In the end, it was chased out. Ning Shuima understood its feelings very well, so she stroked its horn to comfort it. She looked at the crystal chains again and nodded with a sigh. The person who made this crystal coffin was also an elegant person. I didn't expect that these chains could play music. There are cracks on the coffin lid. She carefully observed the crack. The shape of the crack was like a tree with twigs and leaves. Could it be that the mechanism was on this tree? Ning Shuima lowered her head to study the tree again. All her attention was on the coffin lid. She didn't notice that the eyelashes of the red-clothed man who had been lying quietly in the coffin fluttered slightly, like the fluttering wings of a butterfly. Ning Shuima's fingers were caressing the tree, while the red-clothed man's palm was also pressing against the tree. Separated by the nearly transparent coffin lid, the two people's palms overlapped from time to time. Ning Xuema naturally noticed the pair of hands as well. The fingers on the pair of hands were slender and perfectly curved. Under the contrast of the crystal, they were as sparkling and translucent as mutton fat jade. It was a pair of beautiful hands. In her era, these hands could be used as a hand model. Oh, this person was also very good-looking. He was a standard little fresh meat with picturesque features. It was hard to tell if he was a man or a woman. If Ning Xuema didn't see his Adam's apple and his tall and straight figure, she would probably think that he was a beauty too. This person must have been a demon who brought disaster to the country when he was alive, right? With such a beautiful appearance, who knew how many young girls' hearts were tied to the corner of his robe? Teske. It's a pity to die here at such a young age. Chapter 250. She looked at the Guqin again, and a thought suddenly came to her mind. She blurted out, "Could this person be the legendary demon ancestor?" Kieran's body trembled. No, it can't be, right? How could the demon ancestor be buried in such a desolate place? This tomb was too simple and crude. Ning Xuema tried her best to search for information about the demon ancestor in her mind, but the information she saw was pitifully little. This demon ancestor was said to be quite mysterious, and no one knew whether it was a man or a woman. The records about him or her were only a few words, and his or her face was very vague. She only heard that he or she liked luxury, and the place where he or she lived was beautifully decorated. If he or she died, the tomb would definitely be filled with jewelry, and it would not be as simple as it was now. If he or she was buried by an enemy in a hurry, there would definitely not be such a precious Guqin placed beside him or her. Moreover, this crystal coffin was also a priceless item, and the carvings on it were so lifelike. It was not something that could be done overnight. Looking at his gentle and serene face, it did not look like he or she was sealed, but was solemnly buried. If that was the case, the person in the coffin should not be the demon ancestor. She studied the pattern that had just cracked for a long time. She tried several methods, but they were all in vain. Little Qilin was a little impatient. They had already stayed here for no less than 6 hours. It really wanted to go out and breathe some fresh air. Speaking of which, it had not had enough fun yet. It was bored, so it began to wander around the hall, trying to find a hole to go out. But after wandering around for a long time, it could not find any exit. It looked at the thin chains again. Could there be some kind of exit mechanism at the top of the thin chains? With a press of its foot, it leaped into the air and flew towards the top of the dark hall. The top of the hall was very high. Fortunately, Kieran's jumping skill was very high, so it reached the top in a few seconds. The top was a smooth arc, but the chains went through the arc and reached outside. It did not know where they led to. There was no place to stand on the ceiling, so Kieran grabbed the crystal chain with all 4 of its claws. The crystal chain shook and made a series of clanking noises. This chaotic ringing without any rhythm was definitely unpleasant to the ears. The little Qilin was afraid that Ning Xuema would find it noisy, so it hurriedly bit the crystal chain that made the loudest noise. Bang! With a loud sound, its indestructible teeth bit the crystal chain. It thought that it could break the crystal chain, but it didn't expect that the crystal chain didn't break. Instead, one of its small fangs sank into the crystal chain. It tried to pull out the tooth, but it didn't expect that the tooth would hurt as if it was cut by a knife. It was so painful that it let out a low cry, and then it found a very strange situation. A line of blood flowed down from the crystal chain that was bitten by it. Oh no! Its teeth were bleeding. No! This strange crystal chain was sucking its blood. Little Apple was a water Qilin. Just like other Qilins, although it had a lot of water in its body, it didn't have much blood. Qilin blood was very precious. 1 drop could bring a dead person back to life. Therefore, although Kieran often cried, its tears were not valuable, but it was never willing to bleed. At this moment, it saw the line of blood in the crystal chain meandering down like a snake. It was frightened and couldn't help but shout, "Master! Master!" Ning Xuema was studying the mechanism tree on the crystal coffin, so she didn't notice what the naughty Kieran was doing. Chapter 251. It jumped up and shook the crystal chain. Lin Sanjiu thought it was just being naughty and ignored it. Suddenly, Lin Sanjiu heard Kiran's cry. She looked up and was shocked to see blood flowing down the crystal chain. Lin Sanjiu jumped up and climbed up the crystal chain in the blink of an eye. Seeing Kiran's appearance, Lin Sanjiu was both angry and amused. Why did you bite it? Master, quickly break this damn chain. It's sucking my blood. Kiran's 4 claws were shaking. Who told you to bite it? Ning Xuema patted its head. Kiran was too naughty. She should teach it a lesson first. Needless to say, its teeth were broken when it bit the crystal chain. Lin Sanjiu didn't expect the crystal chain to be hollow. If blood flowed down, it would definitely flow down. Lin Sanjiu was not surprised. Master, it's really sucking my blood. My own blood won't flow out so fast. I can feel it sucking. Boo-hoo, I'm going to die. Kiran cried again. One of its teeth was stuck, so it couldn't speak properly. In fact, Ning Xuema had already taken out the dagger. Although the crystal chain was also a cultural relic, it was related to Kiran's safety. She couldn't care less about it. Lin Sanjiu used all her strength to cut the crystal chain with the dagger. Clang! Ning Xuema's dagger, which contained all her strength, didn't cut the crystal chain. Instead, it bounced back and numbed her entire arm. Crystals were not particularly hard. They would break into several pieces when dropped to the ground and would shatter upon impact. Ning Xuema's slash could even cut through steel in an instant, yet she didn't expect that it would be useless against this thin crystal chain. The little Qilin was shaken, causing it to cry out in pain. The blood flowed even faster. Ning Xuema could only stare blankly as the blood reached the crystal coffin. It seeped into the cracks on the lid and faintly seeped into the palms of the person inside the coffin. This coffin was strange. Or rather, the person in the coffin was strange. Could there be a sealed vampire inside? Help. Master. I'm going to die. Kiran's body trembled even more, and he could barely hold on to the chains with his limbs. If it continued to bleed like this, it would bleed to death within a quarter of an hour. Ning Xuema made a prompt decision. Little Apple, bear with it. She stabbed the knife into Kiran's gums and pried it open. Amidst Kiran's screams, the troublesome tooth was pulled out by her. The moment the tooth left Kiran's mouth, Kiran's bleeding finally stopped. Not a single drop of blood flowed out. My tooth. Kiran's heart ached as she looked at her tooth embedded in the crystal chain. If you lose your teeth, they'll grow back. If they don't grow back, I'll get you a fake tooth when I get back. We can't stay here any longer. Let's go. Ning Xuema patted Kiran's head and jumped down. Kiran didn't dare to delay, and jumped down as well. The moment they landed, they heard a cracking sound from the crystal coffin. The tree pattern on the coffin was completely dyed red by Kiran's blood, and the side of the coffin lid suddenly split open. Then, the lid of the coffin slid to the side as if it was pushed by an invisible hand. The red-clothed, black-haired man in the coffin slowly sat up. Did he come back to life? The scales on Kiran's body almost stood up. Ning Xuema also held the dagger in her hand tightly and was ready to fight. She began to consider if she should pounce on him and stab him. Chapter 252. The man in red slowly opened his eyes. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. This man's eyeballs were actually a deep jade color, like a jade wave, rippling with light. Finally, you're out. The man stretched his arms, then closed his eyes slightly, as if he was sensing something, and sighed softly. The air outside is so fresh. His voice was like a breeze, like a flowing spring, like a flower gently floating on the water, like the gentle call of a lark in the valley, indescribably gentle and appropriate. We saved you. Kiran opened her mouth to take credit. The man's voice was too gentle and magnetic, making people feel that he was easy to talk to. Oh, really? That's great. The man's eyes finally fell on the woman and the beast. He slowly got up from the coffin, slowly stepped out, his movements graceful like a poem. His red clothes were like the rays of the sun on the horizon. There was no wind in the hall, but his red clothes fluttered with his movements. You will repay us, right? Kiran asked again. Such a man was as warm as the spring breeze in March, making people feel no hostility towards him. Therefore, Kieran's conditions were very smooth. Of course, the man in red smiled like a blooming flower, slowly blooming in the spring breeze. I can let you choose how you want to die. Kieran, its eyes widened. Are you kidding me? We're the ones who saved you. You want to kill us? The man in red's eyes were like spring water as he stared at Kieran. It's because you saved me that I let you make your own choice. You can choose a less painful way to die. Otherwise, why would I talk so much nonsense with you? Kieran, it was going crazy with anger. You repay kindness with ingratitude. You pervert. You want to kill your savior. The man in red stretched out his 10 fingers like spring onions, as if he wanted to pat Kieran's head. Little thing, a savior is meant to be killed. Don't tell me you want her to use this to threaten you? Kieran did not dare to let him hit her. Kieran jumped 3 feet to the side, trying to avoid the man's palm. However, the man did not move, but his arm grew 3 feet out of thin air and hit Kieran's head. Kieran shuddered. Her hand, which looked so tender and soft, was actually as cold as ice. Fortunately, the man only patted Kieran lightly. Apart from the cold, he did not cause any other harm to Kieran. However, what he said at the end made Kieran's worldview crumble. It arched its body and assumed an attacking posture. I won't let you kill us. It's not certain who will kill who. It bared its fangs threateningly, and all the scales on its body stood up. Oh, looks like you've chosen to fight to the death. Good, you have some backbone. The red-robed man smiled, and his 10 fingers slowly curled. Are you the demon ancestor? Ning Shuima finally spoke. Her voice was indifferent and cold, as if she was not surprised that he would repay kindness with ingratitude. The red-robed man's gaze finally fell on Ning Shuima, and he sized her up. Your dying wish is to know who I am? Ning Shuima smiled slightly. I think you don't know who you are either. Her gaze swept across the crystal coffin. The crystal coffin was still intact, but one side of the coffin lid had been lifted. It looked a little like a damaged piece of art. Chapter 253. A dark light flashed across the man's eyes. Why do you think so? His eyes became even more focused, like sparkling waves that could drown a person in them. Ning Shuima smiled lazily. Then can you tell me who you are? I am. The man in red choked slightly, then smiled. I was almost tricked by a little girl like you. Why should I tell you who I am? His eyes turned again. However, if this is your dying request, I can tell you. Ning Shuima shook her head. I have no interest in who you are. That's a pity. The man shook his head. Then I'll have to let you choose how you want to die. Although we saved you, we don't need you to repay us. We can mind our own business and pretend that we don't know each other. How about that? Ning Shuima stated her request. This man was obviously not an ordinary person. Although he had a smile on his face, the powerful aura that he exuded was extremely shocking. At first glance, it was obvious that he was a ruthless character who could kill millions of soldiers with a smile. It was obviously not wise to go against such a person, so Ning Shuima began to retreat in order to advance. No. The man shook his head. Then you'll break my vow. What vow? Ning Shuima began to have a bad feeling. The man in red slowly walked in front of the crystal coffin, and his slender fingers gently touched the lid of the coffin. All right, in order to let you know when you die, I'll tell you. I've been trapped in this crystal coffin for at least 2,000 years. When I found out that I was trapped in here, I made a promise in my heart that if anyone saved me in the next 1,000 years, I would give them countless treasures and make them the richest person in the world. However, no one came to save me. Ning Shuima, the man in red, sighed again. 1,000 years passed, so I made another promise. If anyone could save me in the next 1,000 years, not only would I give them countless treasures, I would also give them the most respected position. I would treat them as my master and listen to their orders. Unfortunately, no one came to save me. However, after another 1,000 years, you became angry and swore that if anyone saved you, you would kill that person. You only let him choose how to die? Ning Shuima continued on his behalf. A hint of surprise flashed through the red-clothed man's eyes. Not bad. Little girl, you're really smart. You actually guessed it. Ning Shuema secretly rolled her eyes. What was so hard to guess? This guy was obviously copying the legend of the magic bottle from a foreign fairy tale. When he was a child, he had only seen the fairy tale as a joke. He had never thought that he would actually meet one after coming to this world. Was it true that fairy tales came from real life? Since you've already guessed it, it saves me a lot of effort. Now, you can choose how you want to die. You should know that I will never go back on my oath. The red-clothed man lazily leaned against the crystal coffin and looked at Ning Shuema as if he was looking at a dead person. Ning Shuema was also looking at the crystal coffin. She couldn't help but curse in her heart. How good would it be if this guy was also trapped in a bottle? Then, she would have a chance to trick him into entering the bottle again and seal this scourge forever. Now that he was in a crystal coffin, even if she tricked him into entering the coffin again, she wouldn't be able to seal him again. What should she do? What should she do? She quickly thought of all kinds of ways to escape, but she couldn't think of a perfect plan. Chapter 254. Kieran was furious. This is the first time I've heard of someone making such an oath. However, it won't be easy for you to kill us. We still don't know who will die in whose hands. It charged towards the red-clothed man. Ning Shuema's heart was startled. The red-clothed man kept talking nonsense without any intention of attacking because he was trying to figure out their real strength. Kieran's move had exposed his true strength. They were in trouble. In the time it took for her to think, the red-clothed man didn't dodge the little Cheelant's attack. Instead, he lifted his sleeve slightly, and a pale golden light shot out from his palm. It went straight for the little Cheelant's head. The moment it got close to the little Cheelant, the pale golden light transformed into a sharp sword. Why couldn't she and Kieran use their telekinesis? But this man could. It was not fair. Ning Shuema shouted, "Dodge to the right." At the same time, the dagger in her hand flew out like a bolt of lightning, directly colliding with the pale golden phantom sword. Chi! With a soft sound, Ning Shuema's indestructible dagger turned into powder and scattered all over the ground. Her dagger! Ning Shuema furrowed her thin brows in pain. Fortunately, Kieran blocked the faint golden sword because of her move. It was able to dodge in time, and its head was not cut open. Ning Shuema's dagger wasn't able to completely block the light golden sword's attack. After the light shattered Ning Shuema's dagger, it didn't lose any momentum and continued to strike the stone wall where the little Cheelant was standing. Boom! With a loud sound, half of the stone wall collapsed and countless rocks rolled down. The sound was shocking. The little Cheelant shuddered. If it was not for Ning Shuema's reminder, the sword would have hit its head. It was afraid that the man did not need to make another move. It would have been cut in half and died here. This man just casually made a move, but it was so powerful. No wonder he was so arrogant and asked them to choose how to die. Could he really be the legendary demon ancestor? Kieran took 2 steps back, not daring to attack blindly. It tried to activate the psychokinesis in its body. Damn it, he still couldn't use any of it. It seemed that it and its master were doomed today. If it had known earlier, it wouldn't have urged its master to get that Guqin. Kieran was filled with regret. Little girl, you're quite capable. You were actually able to block my attack. The man looked at Ning Shuema and smiled elegantly. I'm a little reluctant to kill you. Since you can't bear to, then just don't kill him. Ning Shuema also smiled. In fact, she was not sure, but on the surface, she remained calm and did not show any signs of fear or nervousness. That won't do. I've always been a man of my word. The red-robed man shook his head. His tone was gentle, as if he was also helpless. So you're saying that you must make a move against us today? Ning Shuema simply sat down on a large rock and looked at him with a smile. His attitude was even more relaxed and calm, as if he had a card up his sleeve. I'm afraid so. The red-robed man sighed. His eyes turned slightly, looking at her and then at Kieran. I swore to kill the person who saved me. If it's one of you, then I can only kill one of you. Ning Shuema and Kieran's hearts skipped a beat. The man smiled brightly like a blooming flower. Tell me, who saved me? Chapter 255. Kieran was stunned. It opened its mouth as if it wanted to say something, but Ning Shuima gently patted its head, signaling it to shut up. The little Qilin was actually obedient. Sure enough, it shut its mouth and stared at Ning Shuima. Ning Shuima looked at the red-clothed man. Your Excellency's thoughts are quite sinister. Do you want us to kill each other? Sigh, to think that a little girl like you would see through it. The red-clothed man smiled gently. But I am a man of my word. I can only kill one of you. But the condition is that you have to kill the person who saved me. I can give the one who is left behind countless treasures so that he or she can live a peaceful and comfortable life. This red-clothed man was very vicious. However, this tactic of sowing discord was used so openly that no one could find a reason to refute it even if they wanted to. The little Qilin glanced at Ning Shuima and inwardly took a deep breath. Suddenly, it stuck out its chest and took 2 steps forward. It was me who saved you. It has nothing to do with my master. Master, come and kill me. Ning Shuima was stunned. She didn't expect Kirin, who was always afraid of death and loved to cry, to have such courage. The red-clothed man looked up and smiled. What a loyal Kirin. You really made me look at you in a new light. Tell me, how did you save me? Kirin proudly said, It was my blood that seeped into your broken crystal chain. Then, my blood opened the mechanism on the coffin lid. That's why you were able to jump out. Oh, the Kirin's blood is indeed one of the conditions to open my seal. The red-clothed man nodded. But, as far as I know, there is another condition to open the seal. That is, you need to use the heaven locking chain to play a beautiful song. Then, the Kirin's blood will appear on the coffin lid. Was it you who used the chain to play the song? Kirin was stunned. It turned out that it was so troublesome to open the seal, and they had bumped into the right person. It also threw caution to the wind. Yes, it was me who used this broken chain to play the song. I didn't know it had this function. It was the one who messed with the chain to make the song, so it didn't think it was lying. The red-clothed man shook his head and looked at Ning Shuima. Little girl, what do you think? Ning Shuima smiled and asked, Do you believe what it said? Of course not. The red-clothed man shook his head and slowly looked at Kirin's claws. Its claws can't play music. Ning Shuima didn't say anything when the little Qilin jumped up. Nonsense. Who said I can't play it? Do you want me to play one song for you? It leaped up and scurried to the coffin lid, using its small claws to fiddle with the chains. Strangely enough, when the crystal coffin was sealed, each of these chains made a different sound. Now, however, there was a series of clanging sounds. It was purely the sound of crystals hitting each other. The red-clothed man shook his head. Little fool. Once the seal is opened, the heaven-locking chain won't make any music. He seemed to have compromised. All right. I believe that you were the one who pulled out the song with your little paws. Since you want to die, I can't help it. Then, he looked at Ning Shuima. Little girl, you can kill it now. Ning Shuima slowly got up and looked at the red-clothed man. She opened her hands and sighed. Okay, as you wish, but my weapon was destroyed by you. I am empty-handed now. How can I kill it? Chapter 256. The little Qilin didn't expect Ning Shuima to agree so straightforwardly and was stunned for a moment. The man in red shook his head and said, Kirin, you are too naive. Humans have always been so cunning. They can sacrifice anyone for themselves, not to mention that you are only her pet. It is natural for her to sacrifice you. Do you feel like a fool now? Kirin closed its mouth and did not speak again. The man in red glanced at it again and said, However, if you want to go back on your words, I will give you another chance. As long as you say that she saved me, I will let you go. You don't have to worry about the 10-year contract. As long as you agree to kill her, I will naturally break the contract for you. So, even if she dies, you will not die. This man was obviously good at grasping people's weaknesses. He was very good at using psychological tactics. With just a few words, he could make the other party suspicious of each other and be on guard. If Kirin's mind was slightly weaker, it would be instigated to turn against Ning Shuima. This was the man in red's goal. He liked to see partners who had been through life and death together become enemies. When the man in red was talking to Kirin, Ning Shuema did not say anything. She only listened with a smile. Kirin looked at Ning Shuema, who was smiling at it. Ning Shuema's warm smile comforted it for no reason. It reminded it of its mother for no reason. It made up its mind and raised its head again. It shouted at the man in red, "You don't have to talk nonsense. It was done by young master. It was done by young master. Although I regret saving you now, I will take responsibility for what I did. I will not implicate master." Stupid. The man in red spat out 2 words. A pale golden light flashed in his palm, and a long sword instantly formed. "You can use this sword to kill it?" He raised his hand, and the sword fell into Ning Shuema's palm. The sword was unexpectedly heavy. Ning Shuema staggered and almost fell under the weight of the sword. She hurriedly used the tip of her sword to prop herself up. A trace of disdain flashed through the red-clothed man's eyes. It seemed that this human girl didn't have much ability. She was suppressed to this extent by a single sword. His sword weighed at least 50 kilograms. Ning Shuema had to lift it twice before she could barely lift it. She flicked the blade of the sword with her finger. The sword buzzed, and the air in the hall seemed to vibrate. "Good sword," Ning Shuema praised. She raised her head and asked the man, "If I kill it, will you really let me go?" "Of course." The man smiled, but there was a hint of mockery in his smile. "Although you humans like to go back on your words, we won't." "Then are you a devil or a demon?" Ning Shuema raised her head and asked. "That's none of your business." The red-robed man's face darkened. "If you want to make a move, then make it quick. I hate dawdling people the most." Ning Shuema sighed and looked at Kirin. "Little Apple, I'm sorry. I have to kill you today. However, on account of your loyalty to me, I can let you die in a place closer to your favorite zither." She approached Kirin step by step. Kirin subconsciously stepped back toward the crystal coffin. The red-clothed man crossed his arms and leaned against the crystal coffin. A trace of passion flashed through his eyes. His favorite scene of killing each other was about to happen. "Little Apple, watch out for my sword," Ning Shuema shouted. She raised her sword and stabbed it toward Kirin's chest. Chapter 257. Kirin subconsciously retreated to the left. Suddenly, it pounced towards the red-clothed man who was standing on its left with his arms crossed. The sword in Ning Shuema's hand was also like a shooting star. It turned in the middle and directly flew towards the red-clothed man's chest. Her movements were very skillful, without any of the sluggishness she had shown earlier. Sharp, straightforward, crafty, and as fast as lightning. Even the best sword-wielding expert would not be able to pull off such a move. The red-clothed man's face slightly changed when he was suddenly attacked. He obviously did not expect that this human and beast would dare to play tricks under his nose. Kirin's claw was aimed at his lower body, while Ning Shuema's attack was aimed at his upper body. In the blink of an eye, all of his escape routes had been sealed off by this human and beast. He really was a character. His body spun around, and 2 snow-white fingers shot out like lightning towards the treasured sword that was rushing towards him. Ning Shuema's thunderous attack was actually easily neutralized by him. The light golden sword was caught by him midway and stopped abruptly. At the same time, he took advantage of the situation and kicked out, aiming at Kirin's nose. Who would have thought that Kirin's pounce was also a feint? Before it could reach the red-clothed man, its body rolled midway and avoided the red-clothed man's fatal kick. The red-clothed man waved his sleeve and held the light golden sword's hilt again. He sneered, "You want to scheme against me with just the 2 of you." Speaking up to this point, he suddenly paused. He subconsciously looked at his palm that was suddenly stinging with pain. Only then did he discover that there was a fine needle embedded in the hilt of his sword. The needle was extremely thin, but it was shining with a blue luster. Obviously, it was highly toxic. Dark green beads of blood were seeping out of his jade-white palm. He was poisoned. This sword originally belonged to him. People did not have much vigilance when it came to things that originally belonged to them. He really did not expect that this sword would be poisoned by Ning Shuema when it was in her hand for just a moment. He actually had his suspicions that Ning Shuema was hiding her strength when she was almost pressed down by the sword. She was deliberately showing it to him to lower his guard. But this little girl was really too young. She was only 11 or 12 years old and was also the most lowly human. She would not take the risk to play tricks when she had a chance to live. Although the red-clothed man had his suspicions, he did not have his guard up. He felt that even if this girl suddenly attacked him, with his skills, he would be able to block it. He could even turn the situation around in an instant and kill this girl. What he really did not expect was that this girl did not want to use a sword to hurt him, but using poison. What was even worse was that she still had a trick up her sleeve. And it was this last trick of hers that made his body suddenly stop. He did not dare to take another step forward. He only narrowed his eyes at the girl standing in the crystal coffin and asked, "What are you doing?" Ning Xuema also looked at him with a smile. The legendary black wave zither was held in her left arm. Her right hand was like a knife that was placed on the zither's strings. What do you think? What would I do? This little girl was even more cunning than a little fox. Her 3 moves were all linked together. Even an experienced person like him had fallen into her trap. The red-clothed man lowered his sleeves and looked at Ning Xuema with a faint flicker in his eyes. "You really are very smart. You actually made me fall into your trap." Chapter 258. However, your poison can only be used on ordinary people. It's not enough to deal with me. As he spoke, dark green blood droplets continuously dripped down from his sleeves. The blood droplets were dark green at first, but after a while, the color of the blood droplets became lighter and lighter. Gradually, the dark green color faded and returned to its original bright red color. It was obvious that although the man was poisoned, he had already forced the poison out of his body in the blink of an eye. Ning Xuema's eyebrows slightly jumped as she lightly smiled. "I originally didn't plan to poison you to death." However, in her heart, she cursed. Her poison needle could even take down a dinosaur, but she didn't expect that it would be useless against this red-clothed pervert. The red-clothed man forced the poison out of his body in the blink of an eye. He began to move forward step by step. "Then what are you planning to do?" "Stop." Ning Xuema blinked her eyes and pressed her palm on the zither. The zither's strings buzzed and made an ear-piercing sound as if it couldn't bear the burden. The man suddenly stopped and pursed his lips. "If you dare to hurt it, I will immediately cut you into pieces." Then obediently stepped back another 8 steps. "Let's have a good talk." Ning Xuema's palm didn't leave the zither strings. She secretly sighed in relief. This red-clothed pervert really cared about this zither. She had made the right move. The red-clothed man was also straightforward. His body moved back 8 steps like flowing water. Sure enough, he moved back 8 steps. "What do you want to talk to me about?" "Let go of the zither first." Ning Xuema gently raised her palm and no longer pressed on the zither's strings. However, she didn't move her hand away. She just pressed it lightly. "Let's talk about the conditions again. Don't play tricks. You have already seen the power of my sword. Maybe it can't kill you, but it's more than enough to destroy this zither." The red-clothed man received her attack just now. He knew that the little girl was not lying. The little girl's power was much stronger than he expected. It was simply beyond his expectations. He slightly lowered his eyes and suddenly asked, "If your power is not psychokinesis, then what is it?" Ning Xuema curled her lips. No comment. Some things were more mysterious, the more scruples people would have. Naturally, it was better to keep her secret. What a cunning girl. The man in red didn't pursue the matter any further. He just looked at her and said, "Little girl, you're very smart. I admire you." His pair of dark green eyes seemed to be sparkling. When he looked at her like this, she felt as if she was surrounded by his gentle gaze. Kiran had been standing beside Ning Xuema the whole time. It was also staring at the man in red, fearing that he would make trouble for them. At this moment, when its eyes met with the man's, its mind suddenly went blank and its body swayed. Ning Xuema's foot directly stepped on one of its front paws. Kiran felt refreshed from the pain. It glared at the man and said, "Hypnosis! Despicable!" He no longer dared to look into the eyes of the red-clothed man. The red-clothed man raised his eyebrows slightly as a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. His eyes were born with the ability to hypnotize people. Thousands of years ago, Countless people had been hypnotized by him and died in his hands. Who would have thought that this little girl was not affected by his hypnosis at all, and even had the strength to kick her companion awake? This little girl was not simple at all. Why are you not affected by my hypnosis? The red-clothed man immediately asked the question in his mind. Ning Xuema had dimples on her cheeks. This time, she simply didn't answer. She just smiled. Chapter 259. No comment again? The man in red looked at her. You're so smart. Ning Xuema praised him. Of course, she wouldn't tell him that she was a secret agent and had been trained to resist hypnotism. The man in red was speechless. This little girl's words were watertight. Moreover, all of her energy had been focused on the zither. As long as he made the slightest move, he believed that with this little girl's ability, she would definitely be able to destroy the zither before he killed her. This little girl had really grasped his weakness. He sighed. Okay, what do you want to talk to me about? You want me to let you go? Ning Xuema smiled. You're quite smart. It's easy to talk to smart people. However, you're only half right. I have other conditions. If you don't agree, I'll die with your zither. The man in red secretly gritted his teeth. What other conditions do you have? Tell me all of them. Ning Xuema was also very straightforward. Her conditions were very simple and very practical. First, you must truly release the two of us. Not a single hair can be missing. Second, you have to open a path to the outside and send us back to the surface. Third, you have to swear that you'll never harm us in this life. If you break your promise, you'll be locked in the crystal coffin for another 20,000 years. The people in this world seem to value oaths a lot, so she simply said the most vicious thing. The man in red was speechless. The elegant smile on his face finally disappeared. Little girl, you're too greedy. Aren't you afraid that if you force me into a corner, I'll use this zither to kill you? Ning Xuema pursed her lips. Oh, I'm so scared. I'm really scared that my soul will be destroyed. However, if you don't make this promise, you'll still harm us when we return to the surface. At that time, I'll still die. Instead of dying a miserable death, it's better to have this Blackwave zither as a companion now. It's not too bad to be destroyed together with the divine artifact. She plucked a string with her little finger and plucked it. The sound was like splitting silk. She controlled her strength just right. If she used a little more strength, the string would break. If he didn't use enough strength, he wouldn't be able to achieve such a shocking effect. The little Qilin was startled by this sudden sound and shook its head. The red-clothed man's expression changed. His heartstrings seemed to have been plucked by Ning Xuema. He clenched his fists again. You. The smile on Ning Xuema's face disappeared. She said coldly, my patience is limited. I'll count to 3. If you still don't agree, I can only live and die with this Qin. 1. The red-clothed man's expression changed several times. He was actually being threatened by a little girl. In the end, he didn't dare to take the risk. He took a deep breath and said, all right, I agree. Ning Xuema didn't buy it. Then swear it first. The red-clothed man could only swear according to her oath. After that, he gritted his teeth and looked at Ning Xuema. Now you can rest assured, right? Give it back to me. Ning Xuema smiled sweetly at him. You're a straightforward person. I like it. You can open the passage to the surface and send us up. Then, it'll be perfect. This little girl really didn't want to be taken advantage of. The red-clothed man was so angry that his teeth itched. However, there was nothing he could do. He waved his sleeve and a wave of pale golden light hit the top of the hall. Chapter 260. Rumble. It was as if the heavens and the earth were falling apart, and a huge hole appeared in the ceiling of the hall. The ceiling was originally filled with rocks, but under the effect of the golden light, the rocks pushed each other to the sides, and the hole extended upwards layer by layer like a whirlpool. A quarter of an hour later, the ceiling suddenly lit up, and the long-awaited sunlight was revealed. At this moment, it was obviously night outside. Looking up from the hole, they saw a dark blue sky with a few stars shining in the sky. Kiran suddenly shouted, Master, my telekinesis has recovered. His voice was full of excitement. Ning Xuema nodded. She also felt that the telekinesis in her body had returned, and it was flowing slowly in her blood. Needless to say, there was a special magnetic field in this enclosed space. This magnetic field prevented outsiders like her and Kirin from using their telekinesis, but it did not hinder the man in red. It seemed like the person who sealed the red-robed man here was quite nice to him. Who was the one who sealed you in this coffin? Ning Xuema suddenly asked him. The man in red glanced at her and gave her an ambiguous answer. Why don't you take a guess? How could she guess? She did not know the history of 2,000 years ago. She smiled. Actually, the person who sealed you was quite nice to you. He did not want to kill you completely. The man in red froze, and his eyes flickered. How did you know? I guessed. Ning Xuema answered straightforwardly. She used her finger to point at the crystal chains. These hollow chains lead to the ground, right? It is these chains that suck the flesh and blood of passing animals on the ground, and then flow back to your body, so that you will not starve to death without eating for thousands of years. She had already seen the skeleton of the demon tiger above, and it was right next to these chains. At that time, these chains did not appear on the ground because of a special spell. Now, the hole opened from the inside, and it happened to be right next to the chains. Therefore, Ning Xuema immediately deduced the real purpose of these chains after a glance. She also knew why the demon tiger was sucked dry in such a short time. The man in red's curly eyelashes trembled, and his pale lips slightly pursed. He looked at his palms, which were pale pink, and it was no different from thousands of years ago. He sighed faintly. Maybe you are right. She does have some feelings for me, but that's not what I want. His handsome face showed a touch of bleakness and sadness. Him or her? Is the person who sealed you a man or a woman? Ning Xuema was curious. The man in red was as elegant as a poem, and he was sinister and vicious. He always smiled, and his true emotions were not exposed. It was rare to see him with such a sad expression. This aroused Ning Xuema's curiosity, and she could not help asking. The man in red's face, and then he smiled. Are you curious? Or do you want to find her and ask her to seal me again? Ning Xuema yawned. You think too much. I have never heard of anyone who has lived for more than 2,000 years, except for the God Emperor of this continent. She suddenly looked him up and down. You were not sealed by the God Emperor, were you? The God Emperor? The man in red raised his eyebrows. What is he? Chapter 261. Ning Xuema was speechless. From the man's words, she could infer that the one who sealed him was not the Dizun. Could there be someone even older than the Dizun? You've never heard of the Dizun? Ning Xuema asked tentatively. Who is he? Should I have heard of him? The man in red asked back. Ning Xuema's heart skipped a beat. The man in red had been sealed here for more than 2,000 years, so he did not know about the famous people in the outside world. In other words, the Dizun did not exist when the man in red walked outside more than 2,000 years ago. So, the Dizun was at most 2,000 years old. Compared to the evildoer in red, he could only be regarded as a rising star. He is the most powerful person in the continent now. He is worshipped as a god by the people of various countries. Ning Xuema explained the Dizun in a few words. The man in red did not care. He smiled and said, I didn't expect you humans to cultivate to the heaven realm. Interesting. I'll go and meet him when I have time. Let's see how many moves this junior can withstand. Ning Xuema coughed. She did not expect to find a strong opponent for the Dizun with just a few words. However, the Dizun had been in a high position for too long. It was often said that it was lonely at the top. Just like Dugu Qiubai, he could not find an opponent for many years. How lonely must his life be? Now that she had found an opponent for him, maybe it would add some color to his lonely life and make his life more meaningful. However, what if this evildoer in red was more powerful than the Dizun? This guy looked very gentle, but in fact, he was a cruel and merciless scourge. Would he bring a rain of blood to this world? Then, she would have committed a great sin. Who was the one who sealed him away back then? She had never heard of anyone older than the Dizun. Could it be a hermit from somewhere? Ning Xuema felt that there must be many unknown hermits in this world. It was just like the Jianghu that she was familiar with in her time. Some people liked to be high-profile and became heroes or gang leaders. There were also people who liked to be low-key and had real martial arts but never showed it in front of others. They were unknown in the Jianghu. For example, the sweeping monk in Demigods and Semi-Devils. Forget it. Things had already developed to this point. It was useless for her to regret. She could only take one step at a time. It's fate that we've conversed for so long. May I know your name? Ning Xuema wanted to find out his name so that she could go back and check his information. The red-clothed man raised his eyebrows and smiled gently, but his words were poisonous. Little girl, do you think you are qualified to know my name? It was obvious that he did not put Ning Xuema, a little human, in his eyes. Arrogant evildoer. Ning Xuema didn't want to talk nonsense with him anymore. She patted Kieran's shoulder and said, "Little apple, let's go up." Then she jumped onto Kieran's back. "Leave the black wave zither behind," the red-clothed man said coldly. "I'll return it to you when we go up." Ning Xuema hugged the zither even tighter. Although the red-clothed evildoer had made a vow, Ning Xuema was still not at ease until she returned to the surface. If she returned the zither now, who knew if he would cause trouble again? "Little girl, you're very cautious. I hope you won't regret your decision after you go up." The red-clothed man smiled mysteriously. He crossed his arms and stood to the side, giving way to the passage. "Do you want me to send you up, or do you want to go up by yourselves?" Chapter 262. Let's go up by ourselves. Kieran interrupted. Now that it had recovered its psychokinesis, it would not take much effort to get out of the cave. Kieran stomped on the ground with its 4 hooves and jumped up 30 to 40 feet high. When it was about to run out of energy, it kicked off the stone wall and jumped up a few more feet. The man in red had no intention of playing tricks. He crossed his arms and said, "Be careful. It's okay if you fall to your deaths, but don't break my guqin." What a freak. Ning Xuema wanted to smash the guqin in her arms on his head. She smiled on Kieran's back. "Then you must bless us so that we don't fall. If I fall, I will definitely use this guqin as a cushion." Ning Xuema did not expect that she would be ambushed after she escaped from the strange cave safely with Kieran on her back. This ambush was not launched by the red-clothed man, but came from all directions. She and the little Qilin had just landed on the ground, but before they could even stand firm, they heard a whistling sound. Following that, 2 rays of light and a type of magic tool came crashing down on her. Ning Xuema was gobsmacked. Right now, apart from the zither, she didn't have any other weapon that could block the attacks. She could only turn around and hide under the little Qilin's belly, avoiding the attacks of those magic tools. Little Qilin was suddenly attacked and was startled. It reacted quickly and immediately opened its mouth to spit out a green drizzling water wall to protect its body. 2 of those attacking rays and magic tools smashed into the water wall, and the little Qilin dodged the last one with lightning speed. The water wall swayed, and even the little Qilin's body swayed along with it. It was very obvious that the power of those 2 rays of light wasn't small, causing the little Qilin to feel somewhat strained. The water wall shook and disappeared, revealing the figures of a man and a beast. "Kieran! Kieran! It's really Kieran!" Someone shouted in surprise and disbelief. Following the voice, 3 figures flew over from 3 directions and surrounded Ning Xuema and Kieran. Ning Xuema jumped up from under Kieran's stomach and finally saw the 3 people who ambushed her. Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized one of them. One of them was wearing white clothes and a white skirt. She was beautiful and cold. She was the disciple of bright reverence religion, Zhong Rushuang. The other 2 were wearing white robes with bird feathers embroidered on their collars. They were obviously disciples of bright reverence religion. These 3 people were 2 men and 1 woman. The man was handsome and free and easy, while the woman was as beautiful as a flower. It seemed the rumors were true. Bright Reverence Cult and Sun Moon Sect were similar. Not only were their disciples' martial arts high, they were also outstanding in appearance. Any one of them would be enough to attract the eye. Zhong Rushuang also recognized Ning Xuema. Her beautiful face changed and she said, "Eldest senior brother, 3rd senior brother, It was this stinky girl who killed our junior brothers and junior sisters. If we hadn't been poisoned by this stinky girl, our junior brothers and junior sisters wouldn't have died under the claws of the flying dragon centipede on the 6th peak. Ning Xuema's heart sank. No wonder she didn't see the other 3 people. They were already dead. She pursed her lips and said in a clear voice, "Zhong Rushuang, you plotted against us first. I had no choice but to poison you. It was just to protect myself. Moreover, the poison only hurt a little and made you unable to recover your strength for 2 hours. It wasn't fatal." Chapter 263. You only need to rest here for 6 hours, and you will be able to recover. I clearly told you this before I left. You didn't do as I said and lost your lives for no reason. What does that have to do with me? Zhong Rushuang said angrily. You little witch, you're talking nonsense. How can you be justified when you poisoned us? If you didn't poison us, why would my 3 junior brothers and sisters suddenly lose their strength during the fight? You lost your strength during the fight because you were poisoned by the flying dragon centipede. Don't blame others for your own incompetence. Ning Xuema replied bluntly. Her eyes narrowed again. Zhong Rushuang, you're just making up excuses to take revenge, aren't you? Have you forgotten the oath you swore? Zhong Rushuang's expression changed slightly. I didn't want to take revenge on you. Then why are you and your senior brothers stopping me now? You can't be here to catch up, right? Ning Xuema interrupted her coldly. Or have you forgotten the oath you swore? Do you want me to repeat it for you? You've broken the oath. Aren't you afraid that your master will take the oath? Zhong Rushuang was choked by her words. Her face turned green and white. You, don't talk nonsense. We didn't know you were here. We heard strange noises and came to take a look. We didn't expect a little girl like you to come out of here. She looked at Ning Xuema suspiciously and finally seemed to realize what was wrong. Oh right, where's number 2? How did you come to the 8th peak by yourself? That's impossible. She turned to her 2 senior brothers and said, Senior brother, 3rd senior brother, this little girl is a psychic trash. She has a lot of tricks up her sleeves. How did she appear here? With her martial arts, it's impossible for her to get here. Her senior brother looked to be about 27 or 28 years old. He was handsome and calm, and his bearing was quite calm. He glanced at Ning Xuema and said indifferently, There must be a demon behind this. This little girl is probably a demon. Her 3rd senior brother immediately said, That's right. A trash like her can't possibly come to the 8th peak. He was afraid that she was some kind of demon in disguise. It was possible that she had managed to deceive number 2. Now that number 2 was not by her side, perhaps he had already been killed by her. We righteous sects take it upon ourselves to subdue demons and exterminate devils. Since we've encountered such a monster, we have to exterminate it. Zhong Rushuang's eyes lit up. She snorted coldly at Ning Xuema. That's right. Since he had seen a demon, how could he not get rid of him? Little demoness, I'm not here to seek revenge from you. I'm here to exterminate the devil and defend the Tao. The 3 of them finally found a reason to get rid of Ning Xuema, and it was so open and above board. They didn't want to be polite anymore, and each of them took out their weapons. Ning Xuema lightly clapped her hands, giving them 3 claps. Not bad. That's right, in order to deal with a defenseless little girl. You guys actually put in so much effort and even came up with such a bunch of nonsensical reasons. It's really been hard on you guys. So, the disciples of Bright Reverence Religion are only SOSO. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. She turned her eyes and saw that the man in red had already flown up. At this moment, he was leaning lazily against a big rock. There was a hint of a smile on his lips, and he looked like he was watching a show. It was obvious that he didn't want to get involved. She hugged her zither even tighter, then looked at the 3 of them and smiled. Are you guys going to attack together? Or are you guys going to take turns to fight? She had seen Zhong Rushuang's abilities. She should have reached the 8th level of the human realm. Chapter 264. Even if she were to fight Zhongyu one-on-one, she would not be able to defeat her. Moreover, there were also her 2 senior brothers. Their martial arts were definitely not weak. These 2 dared to bring Zhong Rushuang to the 8th peak. Their psychokinesis was definitely at Earth rank level 3 or 4. They might even be much stronger than Ji Yunhuang. Zhong Yu was even less of a match for them, and Kirin did not seem to have much ability. At most, it could create a water shield or something. She was afraid that it would not be a match for these three people. If she wanted to escape safely, she had to find another way. She was not confident, but she did not show it on the surface. She even smiled as if she had a card up her sleeve. The three people did not expect her to be so calm in such a situation. She sat on the Kirin's back with a calm demeanor. She looked more like an expert than an expert. That kind of demeanor made the three of them shocked. The three of them did not think much of Ning Xuema, who would really take a good-for-nothing as an opponent. Moreover, the other party was a little girl who had not even reached marriageable age yet. They came up with so many excuses just now because they wanted to label Ning Xuema as a witch so that they could get rid of her openly and snatch the Kirin beside her. In their hearts, they still did not believe that Ning Xuema had any real ability. Perhaps she was lucky to be able to reach the 8th peak. But now that they saw her full of confidence, they suddenly felt a little uncertain. Perhaps this little girl really did know some kind of witchcraft? Otherwise, why would the divine beast Kirin let her sit on it so obediently? How was it possible for her to come here unscathed? Who was the red-robed man behind her? Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. The three of them looked at each other and read the words "end this quickly" in each other's eyes. The senior brother sneered. There's no need to pay attention to so much when dealing with evil. You which look young, but you might be an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. Second brother, Sister Shuang, let's go together. At this moment, the three of them had a tacit understanding and thought of the same thing. They looked at each other and immediately made their moves. 3 different colored lights swept towards Ning Xuema. The three of them cooperated very well. One of them attacked Ning Xuema's lower body, one attacked her chest, and the last one attacked her head. Each ray of light transformed into more than 10 rays of light in the air. As the light flashed, they had already enveloped Ning Xuema's entire body. Ning Xuema screamed and swung the zither in her arms to block the balls of light. Damn it! His Guqin. The red-clothed man who had been watching the show cursed in a low voice. His figure flashed, and he waved his sleeve. A light golden sword instantly took shape and spun in front of Ning Xuema like a whirlwind. All the light balls that were approaching Ning Xuema were shattered into pieces. Damned brat, you ruined my zither. I want your life. The red-clothed man's tone was unkind as he stared at Ning Xuema's fingers. This brat's 5 fingers were hooked onto the strings of the zither. As long as she exerted a little force, these strings would break. Because he cared too much, he was even more worried and did not dare to snatch the zither. The three of them were shocked. Although they had noticed the red-clothed man since a long time ago, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. As long as the red-clothed man didn't interfere in this dispute, they didn't intend to pay attention to him for the time being. However, they did not expect that the red-clothed man would make a move at the crucial moment. Moreover, his move was so powerful that he broke their combo so easily. Who are you? Why are you helping this witch? The senior brother asked in a low voice. Chapter 265. The red-clothed man was too lazy to pay attention to him. His eyes were fixed on the zither. Stupid girl, this zither is used to play, not as a weapon. It can't withstand any psychokinesis attacks. Take your fingers away. Don't touch the strings, they'll break. Ning Xuema's mouth twitched. Isn't it the Blackwave zither? It's an ancient artifact. I thought that if I played it casually, it would automatically release a killer move. Bullshit. The red-clothed man cursed in anger. This zither needs a special fingering technique to become a killing weapon. It can kill anyone within 100 li. How could it be as wasteful as you? The Blackwave zither. As soon as these 3 words entered their ears, the eyes of Zhong Rushuang and the others lit up. They could be considered experienced and knowledgeable. Naturally, they knew about this ancient artifact. Their master, Yi Qinghuan, had also been looking for the Blackwave zither. They didn't expect that this artifact would appear here. It really didn't take any effort to obtain it. The 6 eyes of the 3 people were also fixed on the zither. They wanted nothing more than to snatch it. Ning Shuema's eyes turned. So it needs a special fingering technique. Looking at you, you don't know how to play it, right? Naturally, you won't teach it to me. Then this zither is useless to me. She suddenly seemed to notice something. She glanced to the left of the red-clothed man. Her face revealed surprise as she shouted, Dizun? Hearing this shout, Zhong Rushuang and the others were all shocked. They all looked to the left of the red-clothed man. Although the red-clothed man wasn't shocked by the title Dizun, he had just heard of this title. He knew that he was a powerful person, so he also subconsciously turned his head to look. The moment everyone turned their heads to look, Ning Shuema laughed. With a wave of her hand, she threw the zither out like a whirlwind. The red-clothed man's ears were alert, and he immediately heard the sound of the zither flying through the air. He abruptly turned his head and saw his treasured zither fly out from his right side, heading straight for Zhong Rushuang's head. Zhong Rushuang was caught off guard. She heard a fierce gust of wind and saw a ball of blue light hurtling towards her. It was too late for her to dodge, so she could only use the sword in her hand to block it. Just as her sword was about to cut into that ball of blue light, a pale golden ball of light suddenly came in and directly collided with her sword light. There was a sound like an explosion. Zhong Rushuang's sword instantly disintegrated into powder. She was also sent flying by the pale golden ball of light. If it wasn't for her eldest senior brother catching her in time, her head would have hit a big rock and turned into a rotten watermelon. After the red-clothed man sent Zhong Rushuang flying with his left palm, he waved his right sleeve. Like a flood dragon sucking in water, it wrapped around the zither. He obviously treasured this zither very much. After his sleeve wrapped around the zither, he shook it a little to dissipate the force of the zither flying out. He didn't want to forcefully pull on the zither and damage its strings. Then, he rolled his sleeve back and wrapped the zither in his arms. That third senior brother saw that the object flying out was a zither. He originally wanted to reach out and snatch it, but the red-clothed man was faster than him. Before he could do anything, the zither flew back into the red-clothed man's arms. He couldn't help but stare blankly. On the other side, eldest senior brother had already steadied himself with Zhong Rushuang in his arms. Chapter 266. Zhong Rushuang's face was deathly pale. The arm that used to hold the sword hurt as if it was broken. She couldn't even lift it. She was still in a state of shock. The blood in her chest surged violently. She wanted to speak, but when she opened her mouth, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Although that senior caught Zhong Rushuang, his arms were numb from the shock. He almost couldn't hold his junior sister's delicate body. He took 3 or 4 steps back before he could steady himself. When he saw Zhong Rushuang spit out blood, he was shocked. "Little sister Shuang, are you okay?" I'm fine. Where's that brat?" Zhong Rushuang was almost gnashing her teeth. Only then did the other two remember Ning Shuema, who had caused this series of unforeseen events. They looked around, but there was no trace of that brat. There was no need to ask. Ning Shuema had taken advantage of the moment when they were fighting over the zither and the person. She had taken the opportunity to escape at the most chaotic moment. What a little fox. The man in red naturally also noticed that Ning Shuema had run away. He shook his head. It wasn't clear whether his tone was praise or helplessness. His zither had returned to his arms intact, so he wasn't in a bad mood. There was even a faint smile at the corner of his lips. Although he looked down on humans, he still admired Ning Shuema, who was as cunning as a fox and full of wisdom. What a smart little girl. She actually used such a trick to escape and quietly pulled him, who was just watching the show, in. He looked down and carefully examined the zither in his arms. He took out a snow-white silk handkerchief from somewhere and wiped the strings and body of the zither. He wiped it very carefully and meticulously. His expression was focused and serious, as if he was wiping a fragile blue and white porcelain. "Damn it. We actually let that brat run away just like that." Zhong Rushuang stomped her feet. "We'll find her." The senior didn't take it to heart. When Ning Shuema made a move just now, he knew that her martial arts weren't high. She was only at level 2 or 3 of psychokinesis. In his eyes, she wasn't even a rookie. If they wanted to find such a girl in the future, It would be as easy as blowing off dust. Since she had run away, then forget it. They could talk about it later. The most important thing now was this Blackwave zither. This was their top priority right now. His gaze descended onto the red-clothed man. Through that exchange of blows, he'd already noticed that this man before him wasn't simple at all. He was not someone who could be easily dealt with. However, if the three of them joined forces and used their special magic tools, they should have a chance of winning. "Who are you?" Eldest senior brother asked, secretly sending a secret signal to his junior brothers and sisters. The two of them understood and quietly moved a few steps, seizing the advantageous terrain. The man's features were elegant. He was clearly dressed in a fiery red robe, but his entire person was as gentle as water. Under the starlight, his temperament was as enchanting as the moonlight. He was still wiping the zither with his head lowered, as if he didn't notice that the three of them had already surrounded him. Hearing the question of the eldest senior brother, he didn't even raise his head. "I don't want to tell you." "Why? You don't dare?" Yin Rushuang added. "Because it's useless." The man in red continued to wipe his zither slowly. This argument was quite fresh and also quite choking. Third senior brother sneered. "Why do you say that? A real man doesn't change his name or his surname. What's the point of hiding like this? Could it be that your name is shameful?" Chapter 267. The red-clothed man finally raised his head and smiled gently. Under the starlight, his eyes were gentler than water ripples. "The reason is very simple. Because you are going to die. The dead don't need to know other people's names." The three people, they looked at each other, their expressions more alert. The eldest senior brother said coldly, "Your Excellency's words are too harsh. Do you think you can kill us with your own strength? Besides, we have no grievances with your Excellency. Your Excellency's ruthless words are too unreasonable." The red-clothed man's eyes swept over them. "Aren't you surrounding me and talking nonsense because you want to snatch my zither?" He smiled again. "Anyone who wants my zither has only one word: death. Do you guys understand my explanation?" He stood there, his robe fluttering in the wind. His expression was not like he was talking about life and death, but more like he was talking about the weather. This kind of attitude, this kind of bearing, if one did not have absolute confidence, they would not be able to do it. Although the three of them looked young, in terms of actual age, they could be said to be old foxes in the Jianghu. At this moment, seeing this man's attitude, their hearts were beating wildly. It was as if they saw the grim reaper stretching out his butcher's knife. They suddenly regretted. Although the divine weapon was important, their lives were naturally more important. The eldest senior brother knew how to conduct himself and immediately said, "Your Excellency misunderstood. We did not have any extravagant thoughts about this zither." "Oh, then why are you surrounding me?" The red-clothed man seemed to be very easy to talk to. It's like this. We were passing by and heard strange sounds. We were afraid that evil spirits would appear and harm our righteous friends, so we came to take a look. We just happened to see that which coming out of this cave. Brother, you followed closely behind. We thought you were together, so we wanted to confirm it with you." "So this zither is your Excellency's? That's very good. Your Excellency must be a master of music. Coincidentally, my Master Yi of Bright Reverence is also good at music. If you have the opportunity in the future, you may come to our Bright Reverence as a guest." He was obviously showing weakness and wanted to run away. Of course, at the critical moment, he also revealed his master's identity to make this man have some scruples. After all, Yi Qingluan's reputation of being protective was known by everyone on this continent. Every time they met an expert that they couldn't beat, they would show off their master's name. Usually, the other party would give up, and sometimes even apologize to them. This was like the second generation of some officials or the third generation of power. It didn't matter if they had real ability or not. The key was that they had a father that others couldn't afford to offend. Flashing it at the right time was still very useful. On this continent, there were not many people who dared to provoke Yi Qingluan, and even fewer people who did not know her. Unexpectedly, the red-clothed man in front of him was the exception among the exceptions. He glanced at his eldest senior brother and suddenly smiled. His tone was somewhat serious as he said, She is not a demoness. Eldest senior brother was stunned. He coughed and subconsciously retorted, "How do you know she's not a demoness? Perhaps you were also deceived by her disguise." "She can't fool me." The man in red curled his lips. "Because I'm the demon." It was earth-shattering. The three of them were shocked and retreated a few steps. The man crooked his finger at them and smiled even more gently. "Didn't you want to eliminate evil and protect the Tao? Let's do it together." The three of them. Chapter 268. A faint golden light rose from the ground and engulfed the entire rocky slope in an instant. Kieran ran as if it was flying. It ran through the rugged mountain as if it was flat ground. In less than an hour, it ran down the 8th peak, the 7th peak, and headed towards the 6th peak. "Master, you actually used this method to run away. Didn't you say that when enemies meet on a narrow path, the courageous will win?" Kieran didn't understand why Ning Shuima would run away without a fight. "Little idiot, when enemies meet on a narrow path, the courageous will win. When both sides are equal in strength, or when there is no chance to run away, you will fight for a chance. If the difference in strength is too great, then blindly rushing forward is what a boorish man would do. Other than losing your life for no reason, it's useless. As a person, you have to be flexible in order to live longer." Ning Shuima took the opportunity to teach Kieran. Although Kieran had lived for 2,000 years, no one had ever taught it these survival skills. Now that it heard it, it felt enlightened. It didn't recognize the wrong master. She was still very reliable at crucial moments. Ever since they established the 10-year contract, she could communicate with it telepathically. This was also the main reason why they could cooperate so well in these two dangerous situations. The little Chilin's current strength was several levels higher than Ning Shuima's, but when it was together with her, it felt an unprecedented sense of security. It was no longer a lonely beast. It felt good to have companions. Kieran ran over a few mountains. Although it was a little tired, it felt warm in its heart. "Master, you really scared me when you threw the zither out. If that red-clothed evildoer couldn't catch it and broke it, I'm afraid that guy would immediately take your life. When I threw it, I calculated the angle and strength. That red-clothed evildoer treasures the zither so much. It's impossible that he couldn't catch it." Ning Shuima smiled. She was very good at calculating people's minds. She knew that as long as those people knew that the zither was the Blackwave zither, they would definitely be tempted and have the idea of stealing it. They wouldn't chase after her. As for that red-clothed evildoer, because of his oath, he wouldn't harm her unless there were some special circumstances. This move of hers seemed to be extremely dangerous, but she was actually quite confident. She had perfected this plan of diverting the trouble to someone else. She patted Kieran's shoulder. "All right, you can slow down. We don't have to rush back." Calculating the time, she had been out for 4 days. It was also the 5th day since the ancestor came to the imperial palace. The ancestor should have left by now, right? Ji Yunhuang should have been released from the ice palace by now. He should have heard about his imperial father's marriage by now, right? What would he do? Ning Shuima had a good impression of this genius crown prince who had always helped her. "Those 3 people are really bad. They actually called you a demoness the moment they saw you. You're clearly a real human, and you don't have any demonic aura at all. I can see that their psychokinesis is not low, but their eyesight is really bad. You can't even tell a human from a demon. It's not that they can't tell. They're just looking for a reason to kill me. They actually took a fancy to you." Ning Shuima patted its shoulder again. A Qilin beast, that was a rarely seen divine beast. Those 3 people being greedy was also within her expectations. "They're so bad. I won't follow them," Kieran snorted. It was still a little worried. "But since they're greedy now, I'm afraid that they won't let it go. Who knows, they might try to find us in the future." Chapter 269. Ning Shuima's eyelashes curved. "Don't worry, they won't make trouble for us again. The red-clothed evildoer will swiftly finish them off. They won't be able to walk down Tianshu Mountain alive. The red-clothed evildoer does indeed have the strength, but master, how do you know he will kill them? What if he just beat them back? They suffered a loss at the hands of the red-clothed evildoer. I'm afraid they will turn around and make trouble for us. Ning Shuima smiled. Do you think the red-clothed evildoer is a bodhisattva? That guy is very vicious. Once those three people have the idea of snatching his zither, it's time for them to die. Besides, he just suffered a loss at our hands. He's in a bad mood, and those people just happened to deliver themselves to his door. Kirin nodded. Master's plan of killing with a borrowed knife was really good, but there was still one thing it did not understand, so it asked, Master, in fact we didn't have to run away. The red-clothed evildoer treasures his zither so much. You only need to threaten him with the zither. He will definitely help you and send those people away. Isn't that safer? Ning Shuima patted Kirin's head. Not simple, little apple. You can actually think of this plan. You're really smart. Praised, Kirin immediately felt proud, its pair of eyes like crescent moons. Such a smart master is praising it for being smart. But if even it could think of this plan, how could master not think of it? Why is that? It did not want its master to change the topic, so it asked again, indicating that it was not easy to fool. Ning Shuima rubbed the space between her eyebrows. The reason why she did that was because she knew that the red-clothed evildoer was not someone who could be easily threatened. Even if she used the zither to threaten him, he would have no choice but to make a move. His heart would definitely be indignant, and he would most likely go easy on those people, scaring them away. It would also leave her with a big hidden danger. Taking 10,000 steps back, the red-clothed evildoer, under her coercion, would cleanly destroy those people. The trouble was not over yet. Number 2 had said that Yi Qingluan knew the soul summoning technique, so she would know the cause of her disciple's death and who the enemy was. Then the matter of her coercing the red-clothed evildoer to kill those 3 people would soon be known by Yi Qingluan. With that woman's vengeful heart, she would still be the primary target to be hunted down. It could be said that there would be endless trouble in the future. Now that she had used this method to escape, those 3 people would no longer care about her. She was killed by the red-clothed evildoer purely because she wanted to snatch the zither for her master. If Yi Qingluan wanted to take revenge, she would first look for the red-clothed evildoer. This method was rather dark and not too bright. Ning Shuima felt that the little Qilin was still a pure and innocent little Qilin. It was better not to let it understand this kind of a moral method. So she patted Kirin's big head and said, I didn't think of it at the time, so I used a more complicated method. My Kirin is still the smartest. Come on, work hard. Kirin had rarely been praised in his life, and now he was in high spirits again. Master, do you think the pervert in red will chase after us? Kirin was more afraid of him. Don't worry, he won't. He swore not to hurt us. He won't go back on his words. Kirin was slightly relieved, then suddenly remembered something. That's right, Master. The people in this world usually make an oath in front of the gods. An oath has a strong restrictive effect on people or immortals, but it has no effect on demons. Demons can only swear in front of the demon ancestor. That red-clothed evildoer is not an immortal, right? When he swore, was it in front of the gods or the demon ancestor? Chapter 270. Ning Shuima's expression changed slightly. When that guy swore, his first few words were, I swear before God. If he practiced the devil path, this oath would be useless to him. Little thing, why didn't you say so earlier? Ning Shuima felt a headache coming on. I was locked up for too long, so I forgot. Perhaps after 1,000 years, the pattern of oaths had changed. No matter if it was an immortal or a demon, an oath was binding. Yes, it must be so. Otherwise, that red-clothed pervert would have found trouble with her long ago and wouldn't have let her go so easily. She felt a faint chill on her back, so she asked Kirin to walk faster. She'd better go back to Marquis Jingyuan's mansion first. She had drifted outside for several days and had been on the brink of death several times. She somewhat missed the big bed and delicious food in the mansion. The pale golden light surged like a tide, and everything in its path turned into powder. Zhong Rushuang and the other 2 tried their best to dodge, but they couldn't. A moment later, the 3 of them were trapped in the pale golden light. At the most critical moment, eldest senior brother opened the most precious treasure of the sect, the Great Wisdom Barrier. According to legend, this was something invented by the venerable sovereign and was a magic treasure for the disciples to protect themselves. Yi Qinghuan had made one under the venerable sovereign's personal guidance, and it could be considered a master-disciple collaboration. It had a very important meaning to Yi Qinghuan, so she had always kept it by her side, and the disciples couldn't even touch it. And the one that eldest senior brother was opening now was made under Yi Qinghuan's guidance. Although its effect wasn't as good as the one Yi Qinghuan kept, because it had half of Yi Qinghuan's magic power, its effect couldn't be underestimated. When this barrier was opened, it could protect one's own people from all external harm. Eldest senior brother had taken many risks in his life, and in the most critical moments, this great wisdom barrier had saved his life several times. Because using this thing would consume a lot of psychokinesis, he wouldn't use it easily, but now he had no other choice. This great wisdom barrier's appearance was a transparent sphere, and the three of them were now protected inside it. The pale golden light outside submerged the whole sphere, and the rustling sound was like silkworms chewing mulberry leaves. Countless large stones were silently shattered in front of their eyes and turned into flying dust. The power of this move released by the red-clothed man was really too great. It was simply unimaginable to them. The three of them shrunk into the cover and shivered. They finally understood that they had indeed provoked someone they shouldn't have. This person wasn't someone they could afford to provoke. "Hey, your tortoiseshell is not bad." The red-clothed man curiously stretched out his hand and lightly patted the ball. His hands were slender and perfect, like ivory carvings. When he patted, he seemed to be patting casually. But just this one hit caused the great wisdom barrier to bounce a few times in the faint golden light, letting out an ear-piercing sound. It became thinner bit by bit, like a soap bubble, about to burst at any moment. The faces of Zhong Rushuang and the other two changed drastically. Under the shadow of death, Zhong Rushuang finally collapsed. She screamed from inside, shouting out her life-saving magic weapon that had worked every single time. You can't kill us. You won't have a good ending if you kill us. My master knows the soul summoning technique. If you kill our physical bodies, my master will summon our souls for questioning. Once she finds out that you are the murderer, you will be in big trouble. My master will avenge us and teach you a lesson that will make you wish you were dead. Chapter 271. Who knew how many bright reverend school disciples had said such words to intimidate, but this time, in front of this red-clothed man, it was clearly ineffective. A hint of rumination flashed past his eyes. He reached out a hand and patted that great wisdom barrier that was about to shatter. "Hearing you all say this, Wu, I'm actually a bit looking forward to your master's revenge. Originally, I even wanted to scatter your souls together, so as to prevent you all from being an eyesore like flies. But now it seems that no matter what, I have to leave one of your souls alive, or else no one will be able to report to your master." "Oh, which one should I leave alive?" His expression was like he was picking a chicken in a chicken coop. Zhong Rushuang and the other two's faces could no longer be described as deathly white. They were completely devoid of color. It turned out that there were people in this world who weren't afraid of their master. My father is Li Gang had run into, and he didn't buy it at all. The red-clothed man treated them the same way he treated Ning Xuema and the little Qilin. He also gave the three of them a choice. Out of the three of them, only one of their souls could be left behind. However, they could decide who to leave behind. In other words, he supported the three's internal strife, and the one who won and survived would be the lucky one. His multiple-choice question made the three brothers and sisters who had originally shared life and death and worked together to fight against the outside world instantly become enemies who wanted each other dead. Each of them used their own unique skills. The third brother was the first to be killed by the eldest brother, and his body was kicked out of the Great Wisdom Barrier. This Great Wisdom Barrier was indeed a strange treasure. It was easy to leave, but difficult to enter. As soon as the third brother's body was kicked out, it immediately melted in the faint golden light, not even leaving behind a bone. Eldest brother, Zhong Rushuang's expression was mournful, and her eyes were filled with tears. I know you've always liked me, and you loved me the most among all the brothers and sisters. You once played the flute under my window for an entire night, and you said you would go through water and tread on fire for me without hesitation. The eldest brother seemed to be moved, and the hand holding the sword slowly lowered. Yes, I've always liked you, but you refuse to respond to me, eldest senior brother. It's not that I don't want to respond to you. It's just that my telekinesis has yet to break through to the Earth rank. I'm ashamed and afraid that I'm not good enough for you. Actually, I've always liked eldest senior brother. Zhong Rushuang stared at the tip of his sword, and her voice became even more sorrowful. Do you have any proof? Eldest senior brother seemed to be in disbelief. Evidence? Zhong Rushuang smiled bitterly. Do you need evidence to like someone? You're saying this at a time like this because you want me to give you the chance to live. Sister Shuang, do you really think I'm stupid? Eldest senior brother, you're wrong. In order to prove my feelings, I've decided to give you this one and only chance. Eldest senior brother, you take care. The tears in Zhong Rushuang's eyes finally rolled down. A crying beauty was always pitiful, not to mention that she was his sweetheart. Eldest senior brother couldn't help but step forward. Little sister Shuang. Zhong Rushuang looked at him with tears in her eyes. Eldest senior brother, I just want you to know how I feel. I'm afraid that if I don't say it now, I won't have another chance. I understand. Little sister Shuang, I'm sorry. Don't say sorry, eldest senior brother. Your telekinesis has already broken through to the Earth rank level 6. Your survival is more useful than ours. Rushuang only has one request now. What request? Tell me. Chapter 272. Eldest brother, can you give me a hug? That way, even if I die, I can smile in the underworld. Okay. The eldest brother opened his arms, waiting for the final hug. Zhong Rushuang cried out and threw herself into his arms. Eldest brother. A pair of lovers tightly hugged each other in the moment of life and death. Then, their bodies suddenly trembled. The tip of a sword protruded from their backs, close to their hearts. It turned out that they had taken advantage of this moment to plot against each other and deliver a fatal blow to each other. At the same time, the two people's bodies shook, and at the same time, they reached out with their palms, desperately slapping each other away. The eldest brother's martial arts were clearly much higher than Zhong Rushuang's. His palm directly slapped Zhong Rushuang out of the Great Wisdom Barrier. Zhong Rushuang didn't even have time to cry out before her whole body disappeared in the faint golden light. Zhong Rushuang's sword was stuck in the eldest brother's chest. Because he had dodged at the most critical moment, Zhong Rushuang's sword didn't directly pierce his heart. He wouldn't die for a while. He staggered back a step and sat down with a thump. Slut, you lied to me. The red-clothed man stood not far away, watching this good show of killing each other. A trace of disgust flashed through his eyes. In the face of life and death, love and friendship often couldn't withstand the test. They couldn't even withstand a single blow. Their souls have already been scattered, right? The eldest brother gasped for breath like an ox. Now, he was the only one who survived. If his master knew that he had killed his junior brothers and sisters, he wouldn't let him off, however. This red-clothed demon said that the other two souls would be scattered. That way, his master would never know the truth. He could also cry and complain to his master. Maybe he could reincarnate into a good body. Therefore, the souls of those two people must be scattered. The man in red crossed his arms and looked at him. He didn't answer his question. Suddenly, he smiled and said, "You really are the most vicious and merciless person. No wonder you can live for so long." He changed the topic and said, "Actually, the three of you don't have to die. My martial arts haven't fully recovered. Sending out this golden light is already an arrow at the end of its flight. As long as you work together to support this tortoise shell for a quarter of an hour, I won't be able to do anything to you." As he spoke, the faint golden light surrounding the Great Wisdom Barrier finally completely dissipated, and not a trace of it could be seen. Eldest senior brother. His hand that was holding the sword began to tremble. He wanted to stand up, but he was also heavily injured. At this moment, he could only force himself not to faint. He couldn't do anything else. The Great Wisdom Barrier was originally supported by his telekinesis. At this moment, he was already at the end of his road. Naturally, the Great Wisdom Barrier could no longer support him and shattered with a bang. Eldest senior brother lay there like a dead dog, gasping for breath. The red-clothed man's expression became even more joyful. Are you regretting it? Can't wait to tear me to shreds? Eldest senior brother could not answer a single word. What was the use of regretting now? There would be no turning back. He panted even harder, and blood began to seep out of the corner of his lips. The red-clothed man slowly walked forward and made a hand gesture to eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother's body trembled. His arm did not listen to him, and the sword in his hand slowly moved towards his own neck. He wanted to struggle, but he didn't have the strength to do so. Seeing the gleaming sword edge getting closer and closer to his neck, all the hair on his body stood on end. He desperately shouted, You said you would let me go." Chapter 273. Yes. I did say that I would leave your soul behind to inform your master, and let your master find me for revenge. The red-clothed man nodded. His voice was still elegant. He turned his head and looked at him. Will you inform your master? Did this red-clothed demon want him to inform his master or not? He said that he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. If that was the case, he should not be his master's opponent. The eldest senior brother was at a loss and hesitated for a moment. Is this not easy to answer? The red-clothed man was a little unhappy. If you let me go and spare my life, I swear that I will not report today's matter to my master. The eldest senior brother took the opportunity to make a request. Then wouldn't your junior brothers and sisters have died in vain? If your master asks, how are you going to answer? The red-clothed man's eyes were shining. I will say that they died under the claws of the magical beasts on the 9th peak. This is not a good lie. No matter how powerful the magical beasts on the 9th peak are, they will only kill them at most. They will not make their souls scatter. Think of a better one. The red-clothed man was not satisfied with this reason. The eldest senior brother had to think desperately. Finally, he thought of a reliable one. I will say that they died in the hands of the Wind and Cloud Sect's sect leader. The Wind and Cloud Sect's sect leader had always been at odds with their bright reverend school. That sect leader also had the ability to make people's souls scatter. The red-clothed man laughed. Very good. Say it like that. He pressed his hand down fiercely. The sword in the eldest senior brother's hand directly pierced his own neck. Blood spurted out wildly. His eyes suddenly widened, and his body slowly fell down. The red-clothed man raised his hand and gently blew on it. He was afraid that today's matter would set off a reign of terror on the continent. In the future, it seemed that it would not be so boring. He lowered his eyes and looked at the zither in his arms. Suddenly, he faintly sighed and gently wiped it again. With Kirin, the king of beasts, by her side, Ning Shuima went down the mountain very smoothly. All the magical beasts that smelled Kirin's scent fled at the sight of her. Therefore, she did not encounter any magical beasts on the way. She worked hard for half the night and finally reached the 3rd peak at dawn. The magical beasts on the 3rd peak were obviously much weaker. There were already gentle animals like the magical rabbit. There were many disciples from various sects who came here to train and level up. Ning Shuima had also encountered a few waves. She didn't want to have any contact with these people, but Kirin's figure was too eye-catching. No matter which group of people came into contact with him, they would scream, "Kirin! Heavens, that's a Qilin!" Then, a large group of people chased after her. Little Qilin's speed was much faster than these people, leaving them far behind. However, the Qilin beast was an extremely rare divine beast. Since these people had seen it, how could they give it up so easily? They used all kinds of magic treasures to track him down, persevering like sticky candy. Moreover, they would also call their friends and inform their friends in the mountains to surround and intercept them. Moreover, there were quite a number of people who came to the 3rd peak to train. She had just shaken off one group when she encountered another. In less than half an hour, She had already been chased by 5 groups of people. There was a long trail of people behind her like ants. Seeing that there were people who came to intercept her at every intersection, Ning Shuima knew that she could not run anymore. She had to face them. She patted Kieran's head and signaled for him to stop. Kieran had not been chased by people for more than 1,000 years. He was a little panicked. Master, what are they doing? I already have a master. Why are they still chasing me? Chapter 274. Why? It was nothing more than curiosity and greed. The corner of Ning Shuima's lips lightly hooked up. How did you deal with the embarrassing situation of being chased? Kieran has been wandering outside for thousands of years, so he must have encountered many situations like this. The little Qilin paused for a moment. I summoned other magical beasts to block it for me. Ning Shuima's eyes lit up. It turned out that Kieran had the ability to summon other magical beasts. Little Apple, listen to my instructions later. Ning Shuima quickly told Kieran how to escape later. Kieran nodded repeatedly. It also told Ning Shuima about its misgivings. Their Qilin clan's summoned beast ranks were directly proportional to their psychokinesis. Right now, it was still a cub, so its psychokinesis wasn't that high. Therefore, it could only summon beasts that were rank 6 and below. Beasts that were rank 6 and above would at most run away when they saw it and wouldn't listen to its summons. Ning Shuima understood. However, it was enough to summon a few magical beasts below level 6 in this place. In this short moment of delay, people from all walks of life had already caught up to them. There were more than 100 people rushing up one after another. Strange. Why are there so many people in the mountain today? No wonder there is a treasure light in this mountain. It is the Kieran beast. Yes, we did not come in vain. Speaking of which, it has been a long time since a Kieran beast appeared on this continent. Where did this one come from? Ah, there is a little girl riding on the back of this Kieran beast. Who is this little girl? Is she a fairy or a demon? This Kieran beast has a master? In the blink of an eye, these people had surrounded Ning Shuima and were discussing her without any restraint. Ning Shuima glanced at these people's clothes. Obviously, they were from different sections. There were men and women, tall and short, fat and thin. Ning Shuima had done quite a bit of homework in the Marquis's mansion over the past few days. She had researched the heritage of the various great sects on the continent and so on. Although it was the first time she had seen many of these people's clothes, she was not unfamiliar with them. Tempest sect, Limitless sect, 7 Stars sect, Boundless sect. There were disciples from 8 to 9 different sects, big and small. However, he didn't see any disciples of the Sun Moon sect. These people were all staring at Kieran, and the light in their eyes couldn't be concealed even if they wanted to. There was no one who didn't want to hunt an eye-catching pet. It would be dazzling and could help them level up. However, the spirit beasts in this world were not that easy to tame. To tame a spirit beast, there were 2 conditions. First, it had to have spiritual intelligence and be able to communicate with its master. Secondly, people who want to subdue spirit beasts need to learn a kind of pet summoning technique. This kind of technique can't be learned without rank 6 human rank or above. Not every spirit beast that had spiritual intelligence could be tamed. Most of the spirit beasts were arrogant, close to demons. Naturally, they were not willing to be controlled by people. Even if they were captured, they would rather be beaten to death than recognize a master. Therefore, if one wanted to tame them, it was impossible to rely on force alone. These spirit beasts must be truly convinced. Only then could they be used by people. Because of the harsh conditions of taming spirit beasts, although there were many magical beasts and spirit beasts on this continent, there were very few who could really tame them. As for the Kieran, it was originally an extremely rare existence. It would not appear for hundreds of years, so no one had ever tamed it. It was said that the continent's number 1 ancestor also had several spirit beasts, but there was no Kieran among them. Chapter 275. Now that one had finally appeared, it was being ridden by a little girl who didn't even look 12 or 13 years old. And from the looks of it, Kieran was quite obedient. What was this little girl's background? How did she do it? Countless people had the same question in their hearts. Their gazes towards Ning Xuema were filled with envy, jealousy, and confusion. Ning Xuema sat carefree on Kiran's back. Under the countless gazes, her expression didn't show the slightest bit of uneasiness. She was very calm and at ease. She had already guessed most of these people's identities and was a little surprised. She thought that these disciples of various sects who appeared on the third peak wouldn't be of high status and were most likely new disciples. However, after she swept her eyes over their clothes without batting an eyelid, she realized that there were actually high-ranking people like Commander and Hall Master among them. Their positions in the sects were high, so their martial arts were naturally high as well. Their psychokinesis was at least of human level 7. With her current martial arts, she wouldn't be able to defeat even one of them if she were to fight them head-on. Moreover, there were 17 or 18 of them now. In addition to the other small fries, she definitely wouldn't be able to escape if she didn't use any special methods. Treasures move people's hearts. Once treasures were involved, even fellow disciples of the same sect might curse each other to death. Moreover, she didn't have any relationship with these people. She didn't even know them. If they were to attack her, they would have no qualms. The reason why they hadn't made a move yet was because they hadn't figured out her background yet. In addition, the others were eyeing her covetously. No one wanted to be the first to test her limits. The situation now looked peaceful, but it was actually very dangerous. If Ning Xuema didn't handle it well, she would probably be surrounded and attacked immediately. Although Kiran could summon 6th-level magical beasts, this was the third peak. The highest level magical beasts here were 4th level, while the rest were on other peaks. Distant water couldn't quench a present thirst. She would probably have to go through a lot of trouble if she wanted to escape safely. Little girl, which sect are you from? Someone finally spoke. The white robe Ning Xuema was wearing was given to her by Jiazun. Although the material was excellent, there wasn't any symbol of a sect in the style, so they couldn't guess her identity. Her expression was too calm, and her posture too relaxed. Even the experienced martial artists with a pair of sharp eyes couldn't see what was wrong with her expression. Only the truly strong would have such an aura. This little girl's face looked unfamiliar. Perhaps she was some hidden expert? Otherwise, how could she tame Kiran? Ning Xuema's gazes tsssss and hers zzzzzzz. Those people were already wary of her. Now that they saw her like this, they didn't dare to act rashly. The person who asked the question was a hall master of the fragrant hall of the 7 Stars sect. He was intimidated by Ning Xuema's powerful aura, so his tone became respectful instead. Yesterday, in the middle of the night, this mountain suddenly emitted a brilliance, illuminating the entire place. Our sect leader specially ordered us to come to this mountain to investigate, but unexpectedly, we met Your Excellency here. May I know who Your Excellency is? Did you just tame this Qilin beast? Ning Xuema glanced at him again, her voice even colder. Are you going to interrogate me? Chapter 276. Her gaze was extremely sharp and her aura was as oppressive as the sea. That Xiangzhu felt a chill in his heart and could not help but take a step back. I don't dare. I know you don't dare either. Ning Xuema's tone was cold. Benzin still has matters to attend to. I won't keep you company. She urged Kiran underneath her. Kiran understood and walked towards that Xiangzhu in large strides. It was obvious that it wanted to let him pass. Her aura was too strong right now. Nobody could figure out her depth, so nobody dared to stop her. Wherever she went, they all got out of her way. That Xiangzhu was also stunned by her. Seeing her walking towards him, he could not help but move to the side to open up a path. Ning Xuema slowly walked past him. A faint fragrance was emitted from the young girl's body, intoxicating and mysterious. That Xiangzhu lowered his head and bowed. His expression did not change, but in the end, he was not reconciled. He wanted to test Ning Xuema's depth. After Ning Xuema passed by, he suddenly made his move. He raised his hand and a jet-black brilliance attacked Ning Xuema's back. Ning Xuema did not seem to notice. Seeing that jet-black brilliance was about to reach her back, her figure flashed and suddenly disappeared. That Xiangzhu was startled. He suddenly felt dizzy. He staggered and fell to the ground with a putong sound. Everybody was originally watching every move that was happening here closely. Ning Xuema's every movement was seen by them. There were so many people present, but not a single person saw her figure clearly. They only saw a faint shadow flashing around that Xiangzhu. That Xiangzhu fell to the ground with a putong sound. By the time everybody came back to their senses, Ning Xuema had already returned to Kiran's back. She continued to move forward without even looking back. Everybody was speechless. What a fast speed. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was like thunder and lightning. Just based on this kind of movement, it was enough to prove that this girl was a top expert. That Xiangzhu could be considered a well-known character on this continent. Unexpectedly, he did not even make a move before he fell to the ground. Nobody even saw how she made her move. What did this mean? An expert. An absolute expert. When did such an expert appear on this continent? They didn't even know about it. Ning Xuema didn't look back, but she knew that she had shocked everyone. They no longer dared to act recklessly. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. She continued to walk at a leisurely pace. Incense Master, Incense Master. The disciples of the Incense Master looked at their Incense Master in panic. The Incense Master's eyes were tightly shut, and his face was pale gold. His body was twitching as if he was in extreme pain. His disciples pinched his philtrum and tried all kinds of first aid, but to no avail. Everybody gathered around him, but they could not see anything. The disciples had already tested him with silver needles, but this Xiangzhu did not look like he was poisoned. Instead, he looked like he was hit by some kind of unique skill. Seeing that the Incense Master was twitching even more violently, one of the disciples was enlightened. He suddenly knelt down in front of Ning Xuema's back. Just now, our Incense Master only wanted to test your skills. He did not have any evil intentions. We hope that your excellency will be magnanimous enough to forgive our Incense Master's mistake and save his life. He kowtowed repeatedly. Kiran, who was slowly moving forward, paused for a moment. Ning Xuema's voice was indifferent and cold. If he really had evil intentions, how could he still be so angry? Forget it. Seeing that you are from a prestigious and upright sect, I will spare him this time. There will be no next time. She flicked her finger, and a pale white pill flew into the disciple's hand. Give it to him. Chapter 277. The disciple was overjoyed. He did not dare to delay and quickly gave the Incense Master the medicine. Everyone raised their heads and looked at Ning Xuema's back. Although they were unwilling, they did not dare to make any moves. However, they were unwilling to let her go like this. Ning Xuema gently patted Kiran's horn. Kiran understood and raised its head to let out a long whistle. The whistle was clear and loud and spread far away. In a moment, all kinds of beasts roared in the surrounding forest. The trees crackled and countless beasts rushed over. Everyone was shocked. Although the level of these beasts was not high, there were many of them. Moreover, there were many kinds of beasts. Among them, there was no lack of man-eating beasts. Although there were some experts among these people, most of them were newcomers. Encountering this kind of beast tide, they were afraid that the newcomers would have an accident. Therefore, the experts of the various sects no longer cared about Ning Xuema. They gathered the new disciples together so that it would be easier to protect them. The scene was a bit chaotic. Everyone was facing a great enemy. What they did not expect was that these beasts did not have any intention to attack them. Instead, they just clustered behind Ning Xuema as if they were protecting her. This scene was too shocking. Everyone held their breaths as they watched the scene unfold before them. Ning Xuema's petite figure was like a queen surrounded by the beasts. She slowly went away in front of everyone's eyes. Who is this person? I can't tell. She is dressed in white, and she is a child. Could she be the ancestor's servant? No, it can't be. I have seen the ancestor's servants' clothes. They're not like this. Then, could she be from Bright Reverence? They teach techniques to retain one's youthful appearance. This girl may not be young. Everyone was talking about it. They were desperately trying to guess Ning Xuema's identity. However, they could not figure it out. No one had the courage to chase after her. Chi. Not far away, a chuckle suddenly came. A bunch of trash. The voice was as elegant as the sound of a zither. Everyone was startled. They raised their heads and looked towards the source of the voice. Then, they were all stunned. On a big tree not far away, there was a red-clothed, black-haired man. Under the starlight, his face was as delicate and elegant as a fairy's. His black hair and red robes fluttered in the breeze. There was a hint of enchanting in his gentleness, and there was a hint of wickedness in his enchanting. Like a gorgeous tune, it slowly unfolded in the night. He stepped on a tree branch that was not even as thick as his little finger, as if he was going to ride the wind in the night. There were so many people present, but no one knew when he had arrived. Without a doubt, this person was an expert, and it was the top-notch kind. The crowd did not know if they were lucky or unlucky. Within a single day, they had met 2 experts on the 3rd peak of the Heavenly Book Mountain. Moreover, they had never seen them before. Who are you? What was the meaning of that mocking sentence just now? There is no lack of proud and arrogant men among these people. After being humiliated like this, they naturally have to ask. If it weren't for the fact that the red-clothed man looked refined and elegant, he would have scolded him on the spot. The red-clothed man smiled. His elegant smile slowly bloomed in the night. You were actually scared by a trash little girl. If you are not trash, then what are you? Everyone, nonsense. How can she be trash? She was able to subdue the Qilan beast, defeat Incense Lord Chang in one move, and summon 100 beasts to protect her. How can she be trash? Your words should be more reliable. Chapter 278. Yes, she is obviously a hidden master. Her movements are so fast. If she doesn't have an extremely high psychokinesis, it is impossible for her to have such good kung fu. Everyone refuted. You can choose not to believe me. The man's elegant face smiled like a spring breeze. Just don't regret it. He leaped up and disappeared from the tree. Everyone was speechless. Kieran's temptation was too great. If that girl was really a good-for-nothing, they would be scared off by her words. Everyone looked at each other. After a while, a group of people chased after Ning Shuima. Naturally, the others did not want to fall behind. They were afraid that someone else would take the initiative, so they all chased after her. The large open space was once again deserted and cheerless. The man in red slowly appeared on the tree branch. He rubbed his chin with his jade-like hand and looked in the direction Ning Shuima had gone. Little girl, you have to pay the price for scheming against me. How would she deal with the crisis this time? His pair of dark green eyes flashed with anticipation. At this moment, Ning Shuima rode Kieran over the 3rd peak and headed to the 2nd peak. Master, you are so cool. Kieran was excited when she recalled the scene just now. You defeated that old man with one move. How did you do it? Ning Shuima was silent for a moment. Cough, I poisoned him just now. You didn't do it? Ning Shuima coughed again and said honestly, if we really fought, I couldn't defeat him, Kieran. But he didn't look like he was poisoned. I saw that they also tested it with silver needles. If it was a poison that could be detected by anyone, how could I scare them off? Ning Shuima smiled and patted Kieran's head. The move I used just now has a phrase in Sun Tzu's Art of War. It is called the empty fort strategy. Sun Tzu's Art of War? If Sun Tzu's Art of War is so powerful, then my Art of War must be even more powerful. Master, you should use my Art of War. Although Kieran did not understand half of it, he still suggested excitedly. The corners of Ning Shuima's eyes twitched. I've never written about the Art of War. He only wrote about the Tao Te Ching. Sun Tzu is an honorific. That person was actually called Sun Wu. Ning Shuima began to teach Kieran about the history of her era. The situation just now was extremely dangerous. First, she used her unfathomable and lofty aura to suppress them, and then when she passed by that Xiangzhu, she released a kind of poisonous powder. This kind of poisonous powder had a serene and elegant aroma. If one only smelled this kind of powder, it would not be poisonous. It was harmless to the human body. After that, she took advantage of the time when the incense master was about to make a move. She used her peerless Qing Gong and her strange footwork to fly in front of the incense master. Then, in a flash, she used another kind of poison on him. When the two poisons were combined, the poison immediately took effect. It knocked down that arrogant incense master and successfully shocked everyone. Then, she let Kieran summon all kinds of fierce beasts to protect her. She appeared even more mysterious and inviolable, making everyone lose the courage to chase after her. To put it bluntly, she had relied on her disgusting poison skills, top-notch qigong, and unique footwork to create an extremely powerful illusion. She had managed to scare everyone so that she could get out of this predicament. It was similar to Zhuge Liang's empty fort strategy. At that time, she did not show it on her face, but her palms were sweating because of nervousness. Now, her inner force was quite strong, but her psychokinesis was still ordinary. She could only use her qigong. If she did not use this method, she would not have been able to escape today. Chapter 279. She was dealing with a group of people, but it was much more dangerous than dealing with a group of ferocious beasts. Fortunately, she was finally out of danger. As long as she was given another 2 hours, she would be able to return to her Marquis Jingyuan's mansion, eat the delicious food prepared by the chef, climb into her own big soft bed, and have a good night's sleep. She believed that this time, all of her servants would definitely be present. This adventure could be considered to have come to a successful end. Her eyelashes curved slightly, and just as she was about to smile, she suddenly sensed something and her expression changed. Someone is chasing after us. Kieran was stunned. How do you know? It did not even hear the cries of the birds in the surrounding forest. Be careful underground, Ning Xuema shouted softly. Before her voice died away, rows of sharp stone spikes suddenly stood up from the ground that was full of fallen leaves. At the same time, countless green leaves flew towards the woman and the beast like green arrows. Ning Xuema's upper and lower paths were sealed in an instant. Ning Xuema did not have any weapons in her hands, but fortunately, she was playing with a branch. Seeing that the situation was not good, she waved the branch in her palm. Kieran let out a long howl, opened its mouth, and a blue wave swept across the ground. Wherever the blue wave passed, the sharp stone spikes were broken into pieces and turned into powder. Although Ning Xuema used all her strength to sweep away the flying leaves, the force contained in the leaves was too great. Obviously, it was sent by a master. Ning Xuema's arm was shaken until it was numb and painful. The branch that was as thick as a thumb was cut into a small section. The back of her hand was also cut by a leaf, and there was a bloody wound. Blood was flowing out. Ha ha ha, you were just bluffing. This old man almost fell for your trick. A group of people who seemed to have rushed over from the ground came out from the soft ground and landed in front of Ning Xuema. Yes, we were all fooled. This little girl is just... A group of people also flew down from the surrounding trees. Her psychokinesis is at most level 3. Her footwork is a little strange, but there is nothing else. Another group of people came out from behind the mountain rocks. Groups after groups of people came out with all kinds of tricks, surrounding Ning Xuema in the middle like an iron bucket. Suddenly, Ning Xuema couldn't escape. How can such a person be the Qilin master? That's right. She must have gotten lucky and tricked Kieran. Little girl, who are you? I shouldn't have deceived so many seniors. If you know what's good for you, then hand over Kieran. A divine beast should be owned by someone with talent and virtue. Not bad, not bad. It's a waste for a little girl like you to have it. Everyone was shouting and yelling. They all wanted Ning Xuema to hand over the Kieran. Ning Xuema took a deep breath. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard the sound of wings flapping above her head. A cold and crisp voice sounded faintly. How is her psychokinesis low? She's just a psychokinesis trash. Ning Xuema, so this is where you are. Ning Xuema raised her eyebrows and looked up. A red-crowned crane flew over at a low altitude. Before it landed, a young girl jumped down from the crane and landed on the ground. She had phoenix eyes, cherry lips, and the majesty of the imperial family in her coldness. It was the princess of vast sky empire, Ji Yunyao. Ji Yunyao was a high-profile person. She was a noble princess and the disciple of the Storm Sect's sect master. Most of the people here knew her. Those who knew her greeted her one after another. The disciples of the Storm Sect even went forward to greet her. Chapter 280. Although these sects were usually not under the control of the imperial family, all under the heavens belonged to the imperial family. The sects in Kong country naturally did not want to offend the imperial family, but the sects from other countries naturally had some misgivings in other people's territory, so they still gave face to this princess. Even if they did not like her, they still kept a respectful distance and tried their best not to provoke her. When Ji Yunyao arrived, she exposed Ning Xuema's identity, so everyone naturally asked about it. Ji Yunyao was naturally happy to dispel everyone's doubts, so she said with disdain, "She's that super trash miss from Marquis Jingyuan's estate. She doesn't even have a bit of psychokinesis, because it was hard for a real trash to appear on this continent." Ning Xuema's super trash reputation was very widespread. Almost everyone present had heard of her. Of course, she was recently locked in an iron cage. Her engagement with the sixth prince was annulled, and Lu Hin-ti proposed marriage, but she was kidnapped. These matters were also spread all over the city. These people had recently been active in Kong country, so they naturally heard about these matters. There were all kinds of pleasant to hear and unpleasant to hear. When these people heard it at that time, they only treated it as a kind of after-dinner entertainment. They didn't expect that the little lass who rode on the little Qilin and almost coaxed them into running around in circles was actually the continent's #1 trash. My imperial father originally took special care of her for the sake of the dead Marquis Ning. Seeing that she was pitiful, he did not care about her bad reputation and wanted to take her as his concubine. Who would have thought that she actually did not know what was good for her and ran here? Ji Yunyao continued to gossip, her eyes flashing with resentment. Wasn't she kidnapped? Someone questioned. Look at her appearance and the clothes she's wearing now. It's obvious that she eloped with someone. This robe is a man's robe. That's right. She must have eloped with her adulterer. Aya, she doesn't seem to be wearing pants. It's indecent. Someone yelled. Although Ning Xuema was wearing a robe, she only wore a pair of briefs inside. She was also riding on Kirin's back, so the robe was slightly flipped up, revealing her white calf. When people saw it, they immediately called it out as evidence. Too shameless. So embarrassing. I'm so embarrassed for her. All kinds of discussions were like a basin of dirty water, splashing Ning Xuema without any scruples. Countless gazes fell on Ning Xuema. Their gazes were filled with disdain as they commented on her. Most of the people who made these comments were girls. After all, when Ning Xuema rode on the little Qilin, she was in the limelight. That cool appearance of hers had subdued many people, making her the focus of attention. Naturally, it also attracted the jealousy of many girls present. Originally, they didn't know about Ning Xuema's background, so they were a little hesitant and uncertain. Now that she finally had the chance, she couldn't help but speak harshly. She couldn't wait to step on her a few more times. Ning Xuema smiled. These filthy words might be very hurtful to other girls, and they might not be able to accept it. But to her, this baptism of saliva was no different from tickling. Some things were fine as long as he had a clear conscience. Everything else was up to him. Her gaze fell on Ji Yunyao's face, and Ji Yunyao also looked at her with awe-inspiring righteousness, as if she was looking at a piece of trash. This princess's jealousy was really perverted. Nothing had happened between her and that crown prince, but she had already attracted such a vicious revenge. Since she didn't give her face, then why should she give her face? Did she really think that she was afraid of her? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.